Before the Duke of Westmere crossed the threshold, Lady Verity Harrow had already been placed where her family thought she belonged. Not at the center of the table. Not near the guest of honor. Not where the candlelight would catch the quiet intelligence in her grey eyes, or the careful grace with which she carried years of unthanked labor. Her name card lay below the salt, nearly halfway, down the long dining table at Harrowden House, between Sir Martin Vale, who heard only what he wished, and Lady Eastbury, who heard everything if it might become gossip by morning. Verity looked at the card for one steady breath, then straightened it by a fraction of an inch. London 1858 glittered beyond the tall windows in cold spring twilight, and Mayfair had dressed itself for judgment. Inside, the house shone with an effort that would have embarrassed it if houses could blush. The silver had been polished until it reflected more prosperity than the Harrows possessed. The crystal had been counted twice. The footman stood in livery, brushed carefully at the cups. The flowers in the dining room were white camellias, because Lady Selina Harrow had declared that roses made her look pale, and Selina's complexion had become for the evening a matter of family strategy. Lady Verity, Mr. Baines murmured beside the sideboard, his voice low enough that no guest could ever accuse a butler of worry. Cook asks whether the second sauce is to be served with the sole, or held until the remove. Verity did not turn from the table, with the sole. Her ladyship changed her mind after luncheon, and forgot to tell the kitchen. Relief softened the butler's face. Very good, my lady. Verity moved to the nearest arrangement and shifted it back from the Duke's place. It would have blocked his view of Selina if left as it was, and Lady Harrowden would have punished the servants for the error, though Selina had placed the flowers herself. A hidden thorn caught the seam of Verity's right glove. The pearl-grey kid leather opened along an old mend with a small, humiliating sound. She pulled her hand back and closed her fingers over the tear. It was only a glove. A woman of sense did not mind a glove when there were unpaid bills in a locked drawer, tenant cottages needing roof, work before winter, and a father who had begun to look ill whenever the post arrived. Yet the torn glove seemed to speak more plainly than any person in the house. It said she had worn the same pair too often. It said she had mended what should have been replaced. It said she had been useful for so long that even her dignity had been expected to last without expense. Verity. Her mother's voice entered softly, and softness in Lady Harrowden was never a comfort. Margaret Harrow, Countess of Harrowden, stood in the doorway in garnet silk, diamonds at her throat, her posture elegant enough to make disapproval seem hereditary. Behind her came Lady Selina, golden-haired and blue-eyed, wearing pale blue satin and the expression of a girl who had been told all her life that being admired was the same thing as being loved. Lady Harrowden's gaze dropped to Verity's closed hand. Not those gloves. My other pair has not returned from mending. Then keep your hands where no one need notice them. Selina tilted her head, her sympathy delicate and useless. Poor Verity. You work so hard that even your gloves suffer for it. Better gloves than reputations, Verity said, before caution could catch the words. Selina's smile cooled. Lady Harrowden's eyes sharpened, but her voice remained smooth. This is not the evening for wit. It is not the evening for any display from you at all. Verity lowered her hand to her side. No, Mamma. His Grace is not coming to Harrowden House to hear clever observations from the elder daughter. Lady Harrowden stepped nearer, bringing with her the faint scent of violets and command. Selina must shine tonight. You know what depends upon it. Verity knew too much. She knew Lord Harrowden had not opened the latest letter from the solicitor, but had left it beneath a newspaper in the library, as if a bill could be smothered by politics. She knew the coal merchant had waited 6 weeks for payment. She knew Brambleford Hall, the small country estate her grandmother had loved, needed repairs no one could afford to admit. She knew Selina's season had been extended past prudence, because Lady Harrowden believed one brilliant marriage might save them all. What Verity did not know was why saving the family required that she vanish in the process. "Everything is arranged as you wished," she said. "His Grace will sit beside Selina. Lady Eastbury is placed where she can observe. Lord Eastbury will repeat whatever he observes to half of London. The Marchioness of Vale will see enough to approve, if there is something to approve." "Good." Lady Harrowden glanced at the table. "And you will not correct the conversation if estate matters arise. A duke is not a ledger. No, nor is he likely to be charmed by a woman who speaks as if she were a steward in muslin." Selina looked toward the mirror above the sideboard and adjusted one curl. "Mamma only means that gentlemen don't like being examined." Verity met her sister's reflection. "Then I shall try not to examine him." "Do not try," Lady Harrowden said. "Succeed." A sound came from the front hall, wheels on the square. A footman's step quickened. Mr. Baines appeared again, more controlled than urgent. "The Westmere carriage has been sighted, my lady." Lady Harrowden's expression changed at once. Ambition dressed itself as welcome. "Selina, come. Verity, make certain the entrance carpet lies flat." One cannot have a guest of that consequence, catching his heel like a tradesman at a market inn. Verity went, because someone had to go. In the hall the carpet had indeed curled at one corner. She bent and smoothed it with her gloved hand, careful not to show the tear. The marble floor held the chill of the evening. Tall candles burned along the wall. Her father, Edmund Harrow, Earl of Harrowden, stood near the staircase with his watch in hand, and apology already in his eyes. He was a gentleman when gentleness required no courage. "Your mother is anxious," he said. "Yes, Papa, it will be easier after tonight." Verity had heard that promise in many forms. After Selina's first season, after the next account was settled, after the harvest, after this dinner. Her family had built an entire future from the word after, and somehow Verity was always the bridge that must hold until they reached it. "I hope so," she said. The knocker sounded. The front door opened, and cold air moved through the hall before the man himself appeared. His Grace Lucian Alderich, Duke of Westmere, stepped into Harrowden House without hurry, and the house seemed suddenly too bright around him. He wore black evening dress cut with severe perfection, and he possessed the kind of stillness that made ornament unnecessary. He was not merely handsome. Handsome men invited admiration. This man commanded attention and appeared faintly burdened by it. His dark eyes took in the hall, the candles, the anxious earl, the waiting servants, and the two women descending the last stairs behind Verity. Then his gaze came to rest on Verity herself, who stood half beside the marble table, half in shadow, as she had been trained to stand. "Your Grace," Lord Harrowden said, moving forward too quickly. "Harrowden." The Duke's bow was exact. "I thank you for receiving me." Lady Harrowden arrived with Selina at her side, both arranged for effect. "Your Grace, what an honor." "May I present my younger daughter, Lady Selina Harrow?" Selina curtsied with pretty humility. "Your Grace, Lady Selina." He bowed, courteous and brief. Lady Harrowden's smile held, waiting for warmth that did not come. "And my elder daughter, Lady Verity. She has been useful in arranging the evening. Useful." Verity curtsied. "Your Grace, Lady Verity." He said her name as if it were not an afterthought. For a moment the hall grew too quiet. His gaze lowered to the hand she kept folded against her skirt. He had noticed the glove. Worse, he had noticed that she was hiding it. He said nothing, which unsettled her more than a question would have done. Lady Harrowden moved quickly into the silence. "Selina has been longing to hear of Westmere Abbey. She has such feeling for ancient houses." "Has she?" the Duke asked. "Oh yes," Selina said. "I think old houses are terribly romantic, don't you?" "That depends upon whether one notices the roof as well as the romance." Verity almost looked up. Almost. Lady Harrowden's fan opened with a soft snap. From the drawing room came the murmur of guests waiting to be arranged around rank, beauty, debt, hope, and fear. Verity stepped aside so Selina might lead the way nearer to the Duke. It was instinct now, that movement. Make room. Give way. Do not require anyone to ask you to disappear. Lady Harrowden leaned near as the others began to move. Her voice lowered. sweet enough to be mistaken for private guidance. No gentleman of consequence comes to study the elder daughter, Verity. Do remember that. Verity kept her face still. She had survived many such sentences by giving them no visible wound to enter, but the Duke had not yet crossed into the drawing room. He had heard. His hand, resting at his side, became perfectly still. His expression did not harden. It settled into something colder and far more dangerous than anger. Lady Harrowden turned back with her practiced smile. "Shall we go in?" The Duke inclined his head, but before he moved, his eyes returned once more to Verity. He did not rescue her. He did not speak. He simply looked at her as if the insult had not made her smaller, but had revealed the room. Then he entered the drawing room, and Lady Verity Harrow, still holding her torn glove closed, felt the first time that the dinner planned for Selina might not belong to Selina by the end of the night. The drawing room had been arranged to make Lady Selina inevitable. She stood beneath the portrait of the 3rd Earl of Harrowden, where candlelight turned her pale blue gown silver at the edges and made her fair hair seem softer than truth. Lady Harrowden guided the guests toward her with the invisible skill of a woman who had spent her life turning rooms into traps. Every introduction found its way back to Selina. Every compliment was caught, polished, and placed before the Duke of Westmere like an offering. Verity entered last, and took the chair no one had meant for conversation, half screened by a palm that had seen better care than most daughters in the house. It should have comforted her, that familiar half-shadow. Instead, she felt the Duke's attention follow her into it. Not constantly. That would have been vulgar. Not warmly. That would have been dangerous in another way. He noticed, and then he allowed her the dignity of not being watched like a curiosity. Lady Harrowden did not allow even that. "Selina plays with uncommon feeling," she said, her voice carrying just enough to include the Duke and exclude no witness. "She sketches charmingly, reads poetry with great sweetness, and has always possessed a natural tenderness for old houses." "Ancient houses deserve tenderness," Selina said, looking at the Duke through lowered lashes. "Don't you think so, Your Grace? They deserve sound judgment first," he replied. "Tenderness is of little use to a roof that has begun to fail." Verity kept her eyes on her folded hands. She nearly smiled. Lady Harrowden noticed the almost smile, because her mother could see rebellion before it had the good manners to become visible. "Verity is more practical," she said lightly. "Every family must have someone who remembers whether the linen has been counted." A ripple of amusement moved through the room, polite enough to deny and sharp enough to sting. Verity did not move. Lady Selina gave a little laugh that sounded like apology but tasted of triumph. "My sister is very good at such things. I'm afraid I should forget whether I had counted 12 napkins or 20. Then London's linens are fortunate Lady Verity exists," the Duke said. The amusement died strangely, as if a candle had been pinched out beneath a glass. Lady Harrowden's fan opened. "His Grace is generous. But we must not bury him in domestic details before dinner." Lord Eastbury, who had a talent for finding the softest wound in any gathering, leaned toward Lord Harrowden. "Speaking of houses, Harrowden, I hear Brambleford has required attention." "The West Range, was it?" Lord Harrowden's face lost a shade of colour. "A minor matter. Quite minor. A few tiles, perhaps. Nothing to concern anyone." Verity looked down at once, but she could not stop herself from knowing. It was not a few tiles. The west roof had taken water twice in spring rain. 2 tenant cottages by the lower road needed drainage work, and the steward had written that one family had begun placing pans beneath the nursery ceiling. Lord Harrowden reached for his glass, though he had not yet drunk. "The expense is barely worth mentioning." Lady Harrowden's gaze moved to him, quick and warning. He saw it. His mouth closed. Verity felt a familiar disappointment settle in her chest, not dramatic enough to be grief and too old to be surprise. He had almost spoken honestly, almost. In the Harrow family, almost was where courage went to die. The butler announced dinner, and society rose in ordered motion. Selina's hand settled on the Duke's sleeve with practiced lightness. Verity was given Sir Martin Vale, whose hearing failed conveniently when any woman said something he did not expect to find useful. The dining room waited beyond the doors, all candlelight and polish, every place card a declaration. Selina sat at the Duke's right, exactly as planned. Lady Harrowden sat where she could steer the conversation without appearing to touch the reins. Lord Harrowden presided at the head of the table, relieved by ceremony. Verity took her place below the salt and folded her torn glove out of sight beneath the napkin. The first course was served. For several minutes, the dinner behaved itself. Lady Harrowden spoke of the season. The Marchioness of Vale spoke of Almack's as if it were a moral institution, rather than a crowded room with rules, and Selina answered the Duke with the soft, decorative opinions her mother had trained into her like embroidery. "I think a great estate must be like a living story," Selina said when Westmere Abbey was mentioned. "Every generation adds a chapter, don't they? Some chapters are better managed than others," the Duke said. "Do you take great interest in management?" Lady Harrowden asked quickly. "A duke must, whether he enjoys it or not." "How very dutiful." "Not dutiful enough would be more expensive." The answer was quiet, but Lord Harrowden's hand tightened on his spoon. Verity saw it, because she saw everything that might become a problem she would later be expected to solve. Lord Eastbury saw it too. "Expenses do have a way of becoming lively," he said, "particularly in old houses. Brambleford Hall has what, 4,000 acres?" Lord Harrowden blinked. Near enough. Verity felt the mistake before the Duke could. 4,000 would make Brambleford grander than it was, and its financial strain more questionable. 2,700 under lease or active use, she said, before caution could stop her. The remaining land is woodland, water meadow, and the old park. The table turned. Not all at once. That would have been too honest. Attention shifted like a draft beneath a door. Lady Harrowden's smile remained, but her eyes hardened. Verity has a habit of remembering figures no young lady need trouble herself with. Figures trouble a household whether a lady remembers them or not, the Duke said. Verity looked at him then. She should not have done it. It was only a glance, brief and controlled. But she saw that he was not amused by her usefulness. He was listening to her as if accuracy were a form of character. Selina stirred her soup with unnecessary care. "Numbers make me melancholy," she said. "They seem so determined to be exact." "That is one of their virtues," Verity said. The words were quiet, but Lady Eastbury heard. "How severe, Lady Verity. Only toward arithmetic, Lady Eastbury." It rarely suffers from correction. Auntless, allyless, seated too low to be bold, Verity expected the little laughter that followed to cut her. Instead, it wavered, uncertain where the Duke's approval might fall. He did not smile. He did something more dangerous. He asked a question. "Do you concern yourself with tenant repairs at Brambleford, Lady Verity?" Lord Harrowden's fork paused. Lady Harrowden moved first. "She assists in small matters. It gives her occupation. Small matters can empty an estate if ignored." Verity felt the trap beneath the question. Not from him, perhaps, but from the room. If she answered too much, she would embarrass her father. If she answered too little, she would return to the lie everyone preferred. "I read the steward's letters when Papa is occupied," she said. "And when the roof leaks, then one reads faster." Sir Martin cupped a hand to his ear. "What was that? Roofs?" Lady Eastbury leaned toward him. "Lady Verity reads roofs, apparently." The ripple of laughter came again, sharper this time. Lord Harrowden stared into his wine. Verity felt heat rise beneath her collar, but she kept her hands still. The Duke's voice cut gently through the amusement. A useful accomplishment in England, that was all. It was enough to change the flavor of the laughter. Lady Harrowden saw the change and moved to reclaim the table. "Selina has always had a feeling for the beauty of houses, Your Grace. She was just yesterday sketching Tintern Abbey from memory." Selina brightened at the cue. "It is the arches I love. They seem to hold longing." "Arches also hold weight," the Duke said, "if properly built." Verity lowered her gaze to her plate. This time she did smile, and this time she was almost certain he saw it. The second course arrived with the sauce, served correctly beside the sole. Verity allowed herself one breath of relief. Cook would not suffer tonight for Lady Harrowden's forgetfulness. That small mercy was all she had time to claim before Lord Eastbury turned the knife again. Still, one hears creditors have grown unusually attentive in town this spring. Not to any particular household, of course, general observation only. Creditors are always attentive to imagination, Lady Harrowden replied. It is their least attractive quality, and a good marriage can quiet many unattractive things, Lady Eastbury said, smiling toward Selina. There it was. The real course served beneath the fish, beneath the wine, beneath every polished phrase. Selina's marriage was not a hope. It was an arrangement the room was being invited to anticipate. Lord Harrowden reached for his glass again. His fingers trembled, barely. Verity saw him glance at her as if he wished her to rescue the moment without requiring him to admit it needed rescue. She turned to Lady Eastbury. A good marriage may quiet gossip, but a sound one should not be asked to pay every bill a family has avoided. The room stilled. Lady Harrowden set down her fork. Selina's cheeks flushed. Lord Harrowden whispered, "Verity, too late, always too late." The Duke looked at her across the distance of rank candles and every expectation her mother had built. "A sound observation," he said. Lady Harrowden's voice softened, which meant the blade had been drawn. "My elder daughter sometimes mistakes plainness for wisdom. We forgive it because she means well." "Does she?" the Duke asked. "Mean well? Mistake plainness for wisdom." The Marchioness of Vale looked down at her plate. Lady Eastbury's fan paused. Verity felt the room shift again, not toward her exactly, but away from certainty. Lady Harrowden smiled as if she had not understood the challenge. A mother must know her daughters. Selina was born for grace. Verity was born for steadiness. Both have their uses. Uses. The word struck the table with no sound at all. Verity folded her torn glove beneath the linen and looked at Selina, who sat beside the Duke like a promise written in someone else's hand. Selina did not look back. The final plates of the course were removed. Wine was poured again. Lady Harrowden lifted her glass, slightly, not yet standing, only preparing. Her eyes moved from guest to guest, gathering them. Lord Harrowden looked at his wife, then at Verity, and for one fragile second his lips parted. Lady Harrowden's glance found him. He closed his mouth and lifted his glass instead. Verity watched the choice settle into him. Then her mother smiled towards Selina, bright with triumph and fear. The candles burned without flicker. The guests waited. The Duke saw everything. Lady Harrowden rose, and the trap she had built all evening opened at last. Lady Harrowden stood with the perfect calm of a woman who had already decided how everyone else must feel. Her glass caught the candlelight, and the wine within it glowed dark red against her garnet sleeve. Around the table, guests adjusted themselves toward attention, forks settled, napkins stilled. Even the footman near the wall seemed to grow quieter, as if the room understood that a performance was beginning, and every person inside it had been assigned a role. Verity did not lift her eyes at first. She watched her mother's hand instead, the elegant fingers curved around crystal, the wedding ring flashing as if rank itself had approved what was to come. Lord Harrowden sat at the head of the table with his glass raised halfway. His mouth had opened a moment before, and Verity had seen it. She had seen the fragile start of courage. Then Lady Harrowden had looked at him, and he had folded his will away, as neatly as a letter never sent. That single failure hurt more than the speech had yet begun to do. "My dear friends, Lady," Harrowden said, her voice warm enough to make injury sound accidental. "There are evenings in the history of a family when one must look beyond the ordinary anxieties of the present and remember what a noble house exists to preserve." Lady Eastbury leaned forward by a fraction. Lord Eastbury's eyes brightened. The Marchioness of Vale raised her glass early, a woman wise enough to approve before knowing precisely what was being approved. Selina sat at the Duke's right, with her lashes lowered and her cheeks beautifully colored. She looked like the daughter in a portrait a mother might commission. before the marriage settlement was even drafted. Verity sat below the salt with her torn glove, hidden beneath her napkin, and felt the invisible architecture of the table settle around her. Lineage, Lady Harrowden continued, is not a matter of old names alone. It is a trust. It asks each generation to offer forward what is finest in it. Its grace, its promise, its most beautiful hope. A soft murmur of admiration moved through the guests. Selina's color deepened. Verity's fingers curled beneath the table, and the split in her glove opened slightly along the seam. It was absurd to notice the small sting of leather against skin when her mother was preparing something far sharper. But the body often fastened upon the injury it was permitted to acknowledge. "In my younger daughter," Lady Harrowden said, and the room exhaled because the expected name had arrived. "I have always seen that hope made visible. Lady Selina possesses the gentleness, refinement, and natural elegance that lift a family beyond its present troubles. She has never mistaken usefulness for grace. She has never sought to dazzle by correction when kindness would serve better. She understands, as every truly admirable woman must, that a noble house is honored not by the daughter who labors, unseen, but by the one whose presence brings honor simply by being seen." Verity felt the sentence enter the room and find her. It did not strike like a slap. It settled more slowly, like cold water poured into silk. No name had been spoken against her. That was why the insult was so useful. A direct wound could be protested. This one arrived dressed as praise for someone else. Lady Eastbury smiled with her lips closed. Lord Eastbury glanced toward Verity, and then away, already weighing how the scene might be told later. Lord Harrowden looked at his plate. That, too, was an answer. Lady Harrowden lifted her glass higher. "I ask you to join me in drinking to Lady Selina Harrow, the daughter whose grace may one day honor even the highest station. May she be seen as she deserves to be seen." Glasses rose. Chair backs creaked softly as guests adjusted. Selina looked modestly overwhelmed, though her hand had gone white around her glass. Verity reached for her own because refusal would make a scene, and every scene in Harrowden House eventually became her fault. Her glove caught again, the tear widening beneath the napkin. She lifted the glass anyway. "To Lady Selina," said the Marchioness of Vale. "To Selina," Lady Eastbury echoed. Lord Harrowden raised his glass. His eyes flickered once toward Verity. For the smallest, most foolish instant, she thought he might lower it. He did not. Then came a sound no one expected. Crystal touched polished wood, clear, final. The Duke of Westmere had set down his glass without drinking. The silence that followed was not immediate. It passed through the table, person by person, extinguishing polite murmurs as it went. The Duke placed his napkin beside his plate, pushed back his chair, and stood. He did not rise quickly. Men who possessed true consequence did not need haste to prove it. Yet the room altered as if every candle had turned toward him. Lady Harrowden's smile remained in place, but the life went out of it. "Your Grace?" she asked. The Duke looked at her. "Your ladyship has toasted the wrong daughter." For one suspended moment, the sentence seemed too plain to be understood. Selina's lips parted. Lord Harrowden closed his eyes, then opened them too late to become brave. Verity did not move. Her glass remained lifted in her hand, heavy now, impossible to drink from, impossible to set down without drawing notice. Lady Harrowden gave a soft laugh. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace. You must forgive a mother's warmth. I toasted my younger daughter, of course. Lady Selina is seated beside you. I am aware of where Lady Selina has been seated." His voice was calm. The arrangement was difficult to miss. A faint unease moved around the table. Lady Harrowden's fan opened slowly. "Then I fear I don't understand you." "No," the Duke said. "I fear you do." Verity felt attention turning toward her, polite and poisonous. The room had suddenly remembered where she sat, which was worse than being forgotten. She lowered her glass and placed it on the table with great care. "Your Grace," she said, her voice low but steady, "please do not trouble yourself on my account." He turned to her. The force of his attention was not pity. That made it harder to bear. "Is that what this is, Lady Verity? Trouble? It is only a family toast." Lady Harrowden seized the opening. Exactly. Verity is sensible enough to know that no offense was intended. The old command lay hidden inside the sentence. Agree. Smooth the room. Save your mother from the truth she has made. Verity looked at Lady Harrowden, then at her father, whose hands were folded now, as if prayer might replace action. Something quiet in her, something bent for years but not broken, straightened by a single inch. No offense was required, Mama, she said. The meaning was clear without it. Lady Harrowden's eyes flashed. Verity, I do not object to Selina being praised. She is beautiful. She has been prepared for admiration with great care. But I object to being made the shadow by which another daughter is better displayed. Selina made a wounded sound. Verity, don't be absurd. Mama didn't mean it cruelly. She meant it exactly, the Duke said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. That is why everyone at this table understood. Lady Harrowden rose then, because remaining seated beneath his judgment would not do. Your Grace, you are a guest in my house. I am. Then I must ask that you not mistake maternal pride for cruelty. Pride does not require a second child to be diminished for contrast. The words struck cleanly. Lady Eastbury's fan stopped moving. Lord Eastbury stared at his plate, with the expression of a man who had discovered that gossip could become too dangerous to enjoy while still present. Lord Harrowden whispered, Westmere, perhaps we might all sit and continue dinner. The Duke looked at him. My lord, you had the opportunity to speak before I stood. Lord Harrowden went pale. The room did not breathe. Verity felt that sentence in a place so deep she had no defense ready for it. Her father looked down, exposed not by accusation alone, but by its accuracy. Lady Harrowden's voice chilled. This is intolerable. Yes, the Duke said. It has been. Selina pushed back slightly from the table. So I'm to be humiliated now? The Duke looked at her, not unkindly, but without the indulgence she had been taught to expect. No, Lady Selina. You are being spared the greater humiliation of believing admiration won at another woman's expense will hold. Selina's face crumpled, though not completely. Her tears knew how to wait for witnesses. Verity stood because if she remained seated, the room would continue deciding the shape of her pain without her. Her legs felt uncertain, but her voice did not. I would not have this dinner ruined. The Duke's gaze returned to her. Was it whole before I spoke? She had no answer to that. Lady Harrowden stepped into the silence. Verity is tired. She has overexerted herself in domestic details. Sit down, my dear. The command came wrapped in tenderness. It was worse that way. Verity looked at her chair, then at her mother. She saw the old life waiting there. Sit down, smile. Disappear gracefully enough that others may call it virtue. Then she looked at the Duke, who had not moved toward her, had not offered his hand, had not taken the choice from her by making rescue look like possession. He simply stood and waited as if her answer mattered. No, Mama, Verity said. I shall not sit because I am ordered to disappear. Lady Eastbury inhaled sharply. The Marchioness of Vale lowered her glass. Lord Harrowden looked as if the words had struck him harder than any public insult could have done. Lady Harrowden's face became very still. You forget yourself. No, Verity said. I believe I have remembered myself at an inconvenient time. The Duke inclined his head slightly, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. The gesture nearly undid her. Lady Harrowden turned to him, fury polished smooth by breeding. And what do you intend to do with this understanding, Your Grace? He looked at Verity before he answered, as if the question could not be answered without considering her first. That depends upon whether Lady Verity will receive a morning call. The room seemed to tilt. Selina's tears stopped. Lady Harrowden's fan closed with a sharp click. Verity heard her own heartbeat, steady and startled. Every rule trained into her urged refusal, retreat, apology, yet the same quiet self that had risen a moment before remained standing. If you still wish to call after tonight, Your Grace, she said, I will receive you. Then I shall come. He bowed to her first. The choice was unmistakable. Only afterward did he bow to Lord and Lady Harrowden, to Selina, and to the room that had just been forced to witness what it would rather have mistaken for manners. Then he left the dining room without drinking the toast. No one spoke until the sound of the front door closing reached them faintly from the hall. Lady Harrowden remained standing, with her glass still raised, the ceremony curdled in her hand. Verity looked at her mother, her father, her sister, and the guests who no longer knew where to place their eyes. The dinner had been arranged to display Selina. Instead, it had revealed everyone. By breakfast, London had given Lady Verity Harrow 3 motives she had never possessed. In one drawing room, she had been desperate. In another, she had been clever. By the time Lady Eastbury's note arrived folded inside a pale pink envelope, she had become a daughter who had staged her own humiliation to trap a duke's attention. Verity stood beside the breakfast room sideboard and poured her father's tea weak, because his head always ached after a night in which he had failed to say what decency required. Lord Harrowden accepted the cup without meeting her eyes. Lady Harrowden sat at the end of the table in grey silk, the colour of mourning without the inconvenience of loss. Selina had not come down. Her absence occupied the room more successfully than Verity's presence ever had. "You will not receive him," Lady Harrowden said. Verity set the teapot down. "His Grace said he would call. And I say you will be indisposed." "I'm not indisposed." The contraction escaped in her voice because she was too tired to sound polished. Lady Harrowden looked at her as though ordinary humanity were another social error. "You will be if you insist upon mistaking last night for victory." Lord Harrowden shifted behind his newspaper. "Margaret, perhaps the call would quiet matters." Lady Harrowden turned only her eyes toward him. That was enough. The newspaper rose again between him and courage. Verity watched the motion with a calm that felt worse than anger. "Quiet matters for whom?" she asked. "For this family," Lady Harrowden said. "For Selina, who was shamed in her own dining room. For your father, who has no strength for scenes. For yourself, if you had sense enough to see it." "I did see it," Verity replied. "That was the difficulty." The room stilled. Lady Harrowden's hand tightened around the handle of her cup. "You will apologize to your sister before luncheon. You will decline any further attention from Westmere. You will remember that a moment of ducal curiosity is not a future." The door opened before Verity could answer Mr. Baines entered with a silver tray held at the proper height, his face as unreadable as long service had trained it to be. A single calling card rested upon the tray. "For Lady Verity Harrow, my lady." The full name moved through the breakfast room like a window opening in winter. Lady Harrowden looked at the card. Lord Harrowden lowered the newspaper. Verity took it before her mother could. The engraving was simple and severe. "His Grace the Duke of Westmere." Beneath it, written in a firm hand, was one line: "If 11 o'clock is not unwelcome." Verity read it twice. Not because she did not understand it, but because the choice of words mattered. He had not announced himself. He had asked. Lady Harrowden extended her hand. "Give it to me." Verity held the card carefully. "It is addressed to me. This house is under my direction." So was the dinner. Lord Harrowden made a pained sound. Lady Harrowden rose. "You grow bold in the most unattractive way." "No," Verity said. "I think I am only growing difficult to misplace." For the first time, her mother seemed uncertain whether to scold or recalibrate. Then Mr. Baines, still by the door, cleared his throat with the smallest possible sound. "Mrs. Aveling has arrived, my lady." Lady Harrowden closed her eyes. Of course she has. Aunt Beatrice Aveling entered, without waiting to be welcomed, dressed in black bombazine with violet ribbons and carrying a cane she used more for punctuation than support. She kissed Verity's cheek, looked at Lady Harrowden and said, "I heard London had become lively. I came before someone tried to make it dull again." "Beatrice," Lady Harrowden said, "this is a family matter. Most disasters are." Aunt Beatrice held out her hand. "Show me the card, my dear." Verity gave it to her. Her aunt read the line and smiled with dangerous approval. "Excellent. A duke who understands conditional arrival, a rare creature. I shall chaperone." "That is not necessary," Lady Harrowden said. "It is entirely necessary," Aunt Beatrice replied. Otherwise, you will stand behind a door and breathe judgment through the keyhole. At 11 exactly, the Duke of Westmere was shown into the drawing room, where Aunt Beatrice had installed herself near the window with embroidery she had no intention of completing. Lady Harrow had attempted to remain present until Aunt Beatrice observed that a mother hovering over a grown daughter's collar suggested either guilt or desperation, neither of which suited garnet silk. In the morning, the Countess retreated to the adjoining room and left the door open exactly 4 inches. Everyone knew it. No one honored it with acknowledgement. The Duke bowed first to Aunt Beatrice, then to Verity. Lady Verity, Your Grace. Her voice remained steady, though her gloved hand had closed around itself again. I thank you for receiving me, he said. You asked whether it was unwelcome, was it? No. The answer was too honest to be safe. Aunt Beatrice stabbed her needle into a blank handkerchief and pretended not to hear. The Duke waited until Verity sat, then took the chair opposite rather than the one beside her. That small distance did more to settle her nerves than any gallantry could have done. I owe you an apology, he said. Verity had expected explanation, perhaps even authority, not this. For what? For making you the center of a room without asking whether you wished to stand there. She looked at him. You defended me. I interrupted cruelty. That does not mean I understood what it would cost you after I left. The words found a place inside her that had been braced for blame and did not know what to do with recognition. My mother believes you acted from impulse. Your mother underestimates how seldom I permit myself that luxury. Then why did you stand? Because she mistook your silence for consent. Aunt Beatrice's needle paused. From the adjoining room came no sound. Verity looked down at the tea tray a maid had just carried in. Habit guided her hands. She poured for her aunt, then for the Duke, and reached for the sugar before she remembered that he had taken none at dinner. She stopped. Forgive me. You do not take sugar. His gaze lifted to hers. Nor do you, though your mother instructed the footman to sweeten yours last night. It was nothing. It was everything. Verity set the sugar tongs down as carefully as if they had become evidence. You observe too much. Only what others insist on overlooking. The answer was quiet enough to be private and clear enough to be dangerous. She handed him the cup. I do not want pity, Your Grace. I haven't brought any. Most people bring it without knowing. Then I shall be careful. He accepted the correction as though it were a courtesy rather than a rebuke. That unsettled her more than argument would have. For several moments, the room held only the small sounds of china and the faint crackle of the fire. Then his gaze moved, not rudely but inevitably, to the hand she had tucked beneath the fold of her skirt. May I ask about your glove? She hid it too quickly. The mistake was immediate. His eyes returned to her face at once, and she knew he had learned more from the concealment than he would have from the tear. It caught on the flowers, she said. Last night? Yes. And before that? Verity's breath shifted. Before that it was mended. By you. Many things are mended by me. Aunt Beatrice stopped pretending to embroider. The Duke did not look triumphant at having reached the truth. He looked almost grave. Then Harrowden House owes you more than thanks it has not paid. Verity looked away, because the gentleness of that sentence threatened her composure more than her mother's cruelty had done. Houses do not pay debts. People do. Then perhaps the people should begin by naming them. Before she could answer, the adjoining door opened wider. Lady Harrowden stood there with a smile, smooth enough to hide anger from anyone who did not know her. How very solemn. Lady Verity has duties, Your Grace. I fear we must not keep her idle with moral reflections. The Duke rose as Verity rose. He did not challenge the Countess. His restraint was exact, and because it was exact, it made Lady Harrowden's interruption look less like authority and more like fear. Then I shall not trespass upon her mourning, he said. May I call again, Lady Verity? Lady Harrowden's smile sharpened. Verity felt the pressure of that smile, the old command to decline, to smooth, to surrender. Aunt Beatrice's attention rested on her like a steady hand. Yes, Verity said, you may. The silence that followed was small and complete. The Duke bowed, but as he turned to leave, his gaze paused on the writing desk near the window. Verity had placed the household ledger there, beneath a stack of correspondence, and from between its pages protruded the torn corner of a paper she had not noticed that morning. 3 words were visible in a solicitor's hand: Lady Verity's portion. The Duke saw them. So did Lady Harrowden. Her face changed by no more than a breath, but Verity knew fear when it wore diamonds. After the Duke departed, Lady Harrowden did not look at Verity first. She looked at the ledger. Then, in a voice too soft for servants and too cold for motherhood, she said, "Those papers are not yours to trouble." Verity closed her torn glove around the edge of the desk and understood that the morning call had not merely brought Westmere back. It had uncovered the corner of something her mother had intended to keep buried. Lady Harrowden's mistake was not that she looked at the paper. It was that she looked frightened before she remembered to look offended. Verity saw it in the half-second after the Duke's departure, when the drawing-room still held the shape of his presence, and the torn corner in the ledger showed the words, Lady Verity's portion. Then her mother's face closed. "Those papers are not yours to trouble," Lady Harrowden said. Aunt Beatrice looked up from the handkerchief she had not embroidered. "An interesting sentence. It usually means the papers are precisely hers." Lady Harrowden ignored her. "Verity, you will bring the ledger to my sitting room. The current household ledger is needed for the week's accounts." I did not ask what it was needed for. Verity's hand rested on the desk. Beneath her glove, the reopened seam pressed into her palm. "Cook has not been paid for the poultry. The coal bill must be checked before Thursday. If the ledger leaves this room, the house will still require its figures. You speak as though the house answers to you." "No," Verity said. "I speak as though someone must answer for the house." The quiet that followed was small, but it was not empty. Aunt Beatrice's eyes brightened. Lady Harrowden's did not. "You are becoming very proud of your usefulness. I am becoming curious about why you fear it." That was too far. Verity knew it before the words finished crossing the room. Lady Harrowden's smile appeared, smooth and dangerous. Curiosity is an unbecoming habit in daughters who do not understand consequence. She turned toward the door. "Mr. Baines," the butler appeared almost at once. "My lady, the household ledgers are to be placed in my sitting room." Verity did not raise her voice. "No, Mr. Baines." The butler froze. Lady Harrowden turned slowly. "You forget yourself again, perhaps. But the accounts do not." Aunt Beatrice rose with measured difficulty, leaning on her cane. "Margaret, if you remove the ledgers now, every servant in the house will know they contain something you do not wish Lady Verity to read. If you leave them, only the 3 of us will know." Lady Harrowden looked at her sister-in-law with dislike too refined to be called hatred. "You always did enjoy meddling, only where the embroidery is poor." For one moment, Verity thought her mother would insist. Then Lady Harrowden glanced at Mr. Baines, calculated the hallway beyond him, and dismissed him with a flick of her hand. "Leave us." When the door closed, she moved nearer Verity. "You will not encourage his grace. You will not parade little injuries for admiration. And you will not rummage through matters arranged before you were old enough to understand them." "Then they were arranged long ago," Verity said. Lady Harrowden's eyes narrowed. "Take care." She left before Verity could answer, carrying with her the fragrance of violets and the sense that every room she passed had been warned. Aunt Beatrice waited until her footsteps faded. "Now," she said, "we find what she fears." Verity drew the torn paper free. It was no more than a corner from a longer letter, its edge ragged where it had been separated in haste. Lady Verity's portion, to be held until such time as settlement may be arranged. The lower half had been torn away, taking the solicitor's full name with it. Aunt Beatrice held it near the window. "Your grandmother." Verity looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because your grandmother believed daughters should have money where mothers could not confuse it with family need. She said so often enough to scandalize 3 cousins and 1 clergyman. I was told she left small legacies to both Selina and me." Your grandmother disliked small gestures. The words made the room feel suddenly unsteady. Money had always been spoken of in Harrowden House, as if it belonged to men, debts, estates, or marriages, never to Verity. If there was a portion, why was I never told? Aunt Beatrice's expression softened without becoming gentle. Because money is permission. A daughter with permission is harder to place below the salt. The linen room lay at the back of the house, past the green baize door, where the air smelled of lavender, starch, and cedar. Verity went there after luncheon, with a stack of table napkins in her arms, while Aunt Beatrice remained in the front parlour demanding chocolate, loudly enough to occupy both servants and suspicion. Behind the folded damask reserved for dinners too expensive to give often, Verity found the older household ledgers. One volume was tied, not with the usual plain tape, but with a blue ribbon faded almost grey. She pulled it free. Dust rose in a pale breath. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. Inside, the entries began in Lord Harrowden's loose hand, then passed into Lady Harrowden's neater script. Halfway through, a section appeared under the heading Private Adjustments. Verity found her name on the third page, portion reserved under Mrs. Elspeth Harrow's settlement instruction. To be held for Lady Verity Harrow's use upon marriage, or upon reaching 25 if no marriage be arranged. Verity read it twice. 25. She was 27. 2 years. 2 entire years in which the paper had known she might be free, while her mother had continued calling her dependent. Beneath the first entry came others. Portion advanced. Portion reassigned. Applied toward Lady Selina's presentation expenses. Applied toward dressmaker's balance. Applied toward future settlement of Lady Selina Harrow. Each line was neat. Each line was bloodless. That made them worse. The money had not disappeared in one grand theft. It had been sliced away politely, season by season, gown by gown, hope by hope. Verity sat on the small stool used by maids for mending sheets. For a moment, the old house seemed to move around her. Every sound muffled by the discovery that a different life had existed on paper, while she had been trained to live without it. She turned the page. At the bottom, beside a transfer dated 2 years earlier, was a marginal note. By consent of Lord Harrowden, Lady Verity being unlikely to require independent settlement. The handwriting attempted her father's slant. It was close. Too close for a stranger. But the capital H leaned wrong, and the final dash lacked the impatient little hook Lord Harrowden always made when his head ached. Verity had corrected his correspondence since she was 19. She knew the failures of his hand better than most daughters, knew the sound of a father's praise. This note was false. She touched the line, and the torn seam of her glove opened again under the pressure. A sound at the door made her close the ledger. Annie, the young housemaid, stood there with a folded note on a salver, and an expression carefully blank. "From Westmere House, my lady." Verity took it. The direction was in the Duke's hand. Lady Verity Harrow. Not Lady Harrowden. Not the Mrs. Harrow. Her. She broke the seal. The British institution offers a private viewing tomorrow afternoon. If Lady Verity Harrow would honour it with her presence, my carriage will be placed at her disposal, and Mrs. Aveling's attendance will be most welcome. I should be disappointed by any answer not written in your own hand. Verity read the last line once, then again, because it did something no line addressed to her had done in years. It gave the answer back to her. "Will there be a reply, my lady?" Annie asked. "Not yet." Verity folded the note and tucked it into her pocket with the torn paper. "And Annie?" "Yes, my lady. Please say nothing of where you found me." The maid's eyes lifted for a heartbeat. Sympathy appeared, quick and risky. "No, my lady." Verity carried the ledger beneath folded linen and returned by the servants' passage. Near the blue parlour, voices stopped her. Lady Harrowden spoke first. "The note came then," Selina answered too brightly. "Yes, mamma." Annie said, "The footman brought it from Westmere House. You will attend the viewing with your aunt. But if it's addressed to Verity, do not be childish. Men do not always understand how women manage these things. His Grace means to continue the acquaintance without seeming discourteous, after last night's disturbance. You are the daughter he was invited to meet. Selina was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, the brightness had thinned. And if Verity objects, Verity has been indulged enough. Paper rustled, a drawer opened. Lady Harrowden's voice softened into calculation. Wear the new gloves, the pearl grey pair. They are elegant without appearing ambitious. Verity looked down at her own torn glove, hidden beneath the linen. The same color, of course. Even that could be improved, transferred, placed upon Selina's hands, as though Verity had only been the rough draft. She might have walked away yesterday. She might have let the note be redirected, the ledger hidden again, the portion become another silence. But the words 5 and 20 held her in place. So did the memory of the Duke's line, not written in your own hand. Verity stepped into the doorway. Selina stood before the mirror, with a fresh pair of pearl grey gloves pulled smooth over her fingers. Lady Harrowden held the Duke's note. For one suspended second, all three women understood the scene perfectly. The invitation had named Verity. Her mother was already replacing the name. That note is mine, Verity said. Lady Harrowden turned. It came to this house. It came to me. Selina's smile wavered. Verity, don't be difficult. You don't even care for exhibitions. I care for being answered when I am addressed. Lady Harrowden folded the note with terrible calm. You are too proud of a gentleman's courtesy. No, Mama. I am beginning to recognize the difference between courtesy and theft. The word struck. Selina's eyes flashed. Lady Harrowden went still, but not before Verity saw the fear return. Take care, her mother said. Verity tightened her hold on the folded linen and felt the hidden ledger heavy beneath it, a secret with edges sharp enough to cut through years. I am, she said. For the first time, I believe I am taking care of myself. By the next afternoon, Lady Harrowden had learned that a note addressed in a duke's hand could not be redirected so easily when Aunt Beatrice chose to make herself the guardian of ink. The old widow arrived at Harrowden House before luncheon, accepted the British Institution invitation from Verity, read it aloud with unnecessary clarity, then placed it beneath her teacup and announced that any attempt to send Selina in Verity's place would require first overturning both porcelain and propriety. Lady Harrowden smiled for the servants and said nothing that could be repeated. Selina said even less. Her new pearl grey gloves lay folded beside her plate, smooth, perfect, and accusing. Verity wore the torn pair. She had stitched the seam again that morning, but the new thread did not quite match the leather. The repair showed if one looked closely. For years, that would have mortified her. Now the visible mend felt like the only honest thing in the house. The private viewing at the British Institution was crowded with rank, silk, and the kind of conversation that made art serve marriage markets. Lady Harrowden came because refusing would admit defeat. Selina came because she had not yet surrendered the belief that a room could be trained back toward her. Aunt Beatrice came because, as she told Verity in the carriage, a battle with paintings. Nearby is still a battle, but the walls are improved. The Duke of Westmere stood beneath a large canvas of a storm-darkened manor, speaking with Lord Belwyn. When Verity entered, he looked toward her at once. He bowed to Aunt Beatrice first, then to Verity, and only afterward acknowledged Lady Harrowden and Selina. It was correct. It was also unmistakable. Lady Verity, he said. I'm pleased you came, Lady Harrowden answered before Verity could. His Grace is too kind. Selina has longed for this viewing since the invitation arrived. Then I hope Lady Selina finds much to admire, the Duke said. I invited Lady Verity because I wished to hear what she noticed. Selina's smile held, but no longer comfortably. Verity felt her mother's displeasure at her back like a cold draught. She looked at the painting instead. The manor on the canvas stood beside a cliff, all melancholy stone and moonlit windows. The artist loves the storm more than the house, she said. Does he? The Duke asked. Yes. He has made the clouds convincing and the gutters impossible. The Duke's mouth almost softened. You object to the gutters? I object to a house that appears romantic only because someone else must pay for its neglect later. For the first time that afternoon he smiled fully enough for her to see what restraint usually concealed. A severe criticism. A practical one. I am beginning to prefer the distinction. The words were quiet, but Selina heard them. Lady Harrowden heard them as well. The exhibition lasted less than an hour, yet it achieved what no one in the Harrow family had intended. Westmere did not parade Verity. He did not flatter her in the shallow language that society could dismiss as gallantry. He asked her judgment, and because a duke listened, others began to wonder whether they should have listened sooner. That was the true danger. Not admiration. Credibility. By evening, the consequence arrived in the form of an opera invitation. Lady Harrowden could not refuse without confirming that Verity's presence had become meaningful. She could not send Selina alone because the note again named Lady Verity Harrow and added that Mrs. Aveling's attendance would be welcomed. So the four women went together, Lady Harrowden in black silk, Selina in pale lavender with her flawless pearl grey gloves, Aunt Beatrice in violet ribbons, and Verity in dark green with the old torn pair upon her hands. The opera house glittered like a box of cut jewels. Carriage lamps moved outside. Inside, every staircase seemed made for whispers. Verity felt eyes turn as she entered Westmere's box. The story of the dinner had travelled before her. So had the morning call. So perhaps had the rumour that Selina had been meant for the Duke, and Verity had somehow unsettled the arrangement. Lady Harrowden moved first, guiding Selina toward the chair nearest Westmere, as though the box had been arranged by maternal will rather than invitation. The Duke stepped aside. Lady Verity will have the better view here. Selina stopped before sitting. Lady Harrowden's smile tightened. How thoughtful, Your Grace. Selina is fond of music too. Then she will enjoy it beside Mrs. Aveling, he replied. Aunt Beatrice lowered herself into the chair with great satisfaction. I improve most things by proximity. Verity sat because to refuse would make the correction louder. She looked down into the theatre, where fans lifted, heads bent, and opera glasses turned with all the innocence of aimed arrows. The orchestra began. For a while music gave the room somewhere else to look. Verity listened, grateful for the discipline of melody. The soprano's first phrase rose bright and sorrowful, and for one breath Verity forgot Lady Harrowden, Selina's gloves, and the ledgers hidden under linen. You hear the warning before she does, the Duke said quietly. Verity turned her head. In the music, yes, that is because the orchestra is more honest than the lovers. His gaze rested on her face. You have a dangerous faith in structure, only when structure tells the truth. And when it does not, then the house falls, the letter lies, or the wrong woman is praised. She had not meant to say so much. The Duke did not seize upon the confession. He let it stand, which was kinder. At the interval, the box became a stage of its own. Lady Eastbury arrived with Lord Eastbury behind her, both wearing smiles bright enough to warn anyone sensible. How delightful to find you all so comfortably arranged, Lady Eastbury said. Her gaze moved to Verity's place beside the Duke, then to Selina beside Aunt Beatrice. Lady Verity, how fortunate you are to have found such notice after so many quiet seasons. The insult was wrapped in satin, but no one mistook the shape beneath. Verity felt the old habit rise. Accept it, smile. Let the room remain comfortable. Then she remembered the ledger, the torn paper, the line that should have granted her freedom at 25. She looked at Lady Eastbury. Notice is only fortunate when it is accurate. Lord Eastbury blinked. Aunt Beatrice made a pleased sound low in her throat. Lady Harrowden's fan went still. Lady Eastbury laughed after a fraction too long. How very sharp. No, Verity said. Only clear. The Duke did not rescue her. He stood beside her with such complete approval that the silence answered for him. That mattered more than a speech. A speech might have made her his cause. His restraint left the answer hers. Lady Eastbury shifted the conversation toward the performance, but the room had changed. Verity felt it in the careful way people looked at her now. Not kindly, not yet, but with uncertainty. Uncertainty was a beginning. Selina felt it too. When the second act began, she sat very still, her perfect gloves folded in her lap. Lady Harrowden leaned near her once, whispered something, and Selina's expression cleared into sweetness. That was more troubling than anger. After the final curtain, they descended toward the carriage entrance beneath the great lamps. The night air smelled of damp stone and horses. Verity drew her cloak around her, and the torn seam of her glove caught on the metal clasp. She looked down at once, embarrassed by the small tug, but before she could free it, Westmere paused beside her. He did not reach. He looked at her hand, then at her face, and waited. That waiting asked more gently than words could have done. Verity gave the smallest nod. Only then did he move. His fingers eased the trapped thread loose with precise care. He did not linger. He did not make the touch into possession. "There," he said. "Thank you." Her voice came softer than she intended. It deserved better mending. So do many things. She looked away, because the carriage lamps had blurred. "You make simple matters sound grave. I have discovered they usually are." Across the pavement, Selina watched from beside Lady Harrowden, her lavender cloak gathered in one hand, her immaculate gloves pale beneath the lamps. For the first time, her face held no pretense of injured innocence. It held calculation, sharpened by public loss. Lady Harrowden murmured, "Not here." Selina's answer carried just far enough. "Then we must make him ashamed of her." Verity stepped into the carriage and sat very still as the door closed. The opera had ended, but the true performance had only begun. The whisper from the carriage entrance did not fade after the opera. It followed Verity through 2 days of breakfast silence, through Lady Harrowden's careful politeness, through Selina's pale smiles, and into the dining room of Countess Belwyn, where 20 guests had been gathered with the precision of a woman who understood that a scandal seated properly could feed a room better than any roast. Lady Belwyn's house in Mayfair was smaller than Harrowden House, but richer in malice, disguised as taste. The ceiling was painted with clouds and gilt birds. The candles were arranged to flatter faces and expose reactions. Verity understood the danger the moment she entered. Selina stood near Lady Eastbury in white muslin trimmed with silver, her new pearl-grey gloves buttoned smoothly at the wrist. Lady Harrowden looked serene. That serenity warned Verity more than anger would have done. Aunt Beatrice, who had come despite declaring Lady Belwyn, a woman who confuses hospitality with bait, leaned on her cane and surveyed the room. "Remember, my dear," she murmured, "when people set a trap, they dislike a guest who inspects the hinge." Verity almost smiled. "I shall look for hinges." Across the room, the Duke of Westmere turned from Lord Belwyn and bowed to her. He did not cross at once. He did not make her his spectacle. Yet his attention reached her with unmistakable steadiness, and Verity felt her breathing settle. Lady Harrowden noticed. Selina noticed more. Dinner began with a civility so smooth it felt rehearsed. Lady Belwyn placed Verity not below the salt this time, but in a position visible enough to be discussed. The Duke sat farther along the table, near enough to hear, and too far to shield her without making the room aware of it. Verity understood the arrangement. If she faltered, everyone would see. If he acted first, everyone would say she required rescue. The soup was served. Then fish. Nothing happened. That was the most alarming part. Lady Harrowden spoke gently to the Marchioness of Vale. "Selina," answered Lady Eastbury with fragile sweetness. Lord Harrowden stared into his wine and looked grateful for every minute that passed without disaster. Verity did not trust a peaceful room in which her mother looked comfortable. Between the remove and the entree, Lady Eastbury gave a small, practiced gasp. Oh, how very strange. Every head turned. A folded paper had slipped from beneath her napkin and fallen beside her plate. The seal was already broken. Verity saw that first. A letter placed for discovery did not arrive intact. Lady Belwyn leaned forward, eyes bright with the effort of appearing concerned. "My dear Lady Eastbury, what is it?" Lady Eastbury lifted the paper between 2 fingers. "I hardly know. It appears to be a letter." Lord Eastbury looked delighted and solemn at once. "A letter? At table? How extraordinary," Lady Harrowden said. and her voice held just enough distress to be believed by those who wished to believe her. Selina lowered her eyes to her plate. Her hands were still, too still. Perhaps it should not be read, Verity said. The words turned the room toward her. Lady Eastbury's brows rose. My dear Lady Verity, I have not even said whose it is. No, Verity replied. But you looked at me before you said letter. Aunt Beatrice made a soft sound of approval. Lady Harrowden's face tightened by a fraction. Lady Belwyn fluttered her fan. If this concerns a guest in my house, perhaps the matter should be clarified discreetly. For Lady Verity's sake, Lady Harrowden said. There it was, the velvet handle of the knife. Lady Eastbury unfolded the paper. It is signed with Lady Verity's name. The table changed. Curiosity became appetite. Lord Harrowden set down his fork with a faint clink. The Duke pushed back his chair. Verity did not look at him fully. She placed 2 fingers lightly on the table, a small signal, almost nothing. Wait. He stopped. She felt the effort it cost him in the stillness that followed. Lady Eastbury began to read. My dear friend, you need not fear that His Grace noticed Selina first. I have contrived matters, so that he must defend me before others. A gentleman's pride, once engaged, can be guided. The dinner was unfortunate, yes, but useful. If he can be made to pity me, I may yet secure more than anyone thought possible. A soft shock moved around the table. Verity heard it as if from a distance. Lady Harrowden closed her eyes in wounded motherhood. Selina whispered, Verity, why would you write that? The last line was read with cruel care. Poor Selina will forgive me. She has always had enough admiration to spare. Then Lady Eastbury lowered the paper. It is signed Lady Verity Harrow. For one moment, the world shrank to ink. Verity saw herself as the room was being asked to see her resentful, scheming, hungry for pity. She felt the old instinct rise, the desire to explain too quickly, to plead innocence, to search every face for mercy. Instead, she reached for stillness. Her grandmother had once told her that a lady's correspondence revealed not only her hand but her habits. Verity had thought it a dull lesson. Now it became a weapon. May I see it? Lady Eastbury clutched the paper. My dear, I don't know if that would be wise, Mize. If my name is to dine without me, I should like to meet it. Lady Belwyn had no choice but to nod. The paper passed down the table. When it reached Verity, she did not snatch it. She unfolded it calmly and read the salutation first. My dear friend, wrong. Then the reference to the Duke. Wrong again, the signature. Almost hers, but not hers where it mattered. The shape was copied. The discipline was not. This was not written by me, she said. Lady Harrowden lowered her gaze. Verity, denial will only deepen the injury. For whom? Verity asked. The question landed plainly. Her mother did not answer. Verity turned to Lady Belwyn. May I read one phrase aloud? Lady Belwyn nodded, trapped by the entertainment she had permitted. Verity read, If he can be made to pity me, I may yet secure more than anyone thought possible. She lowered the letter. I would not write of His Grace as he, in such a passage to a correspondent who knew the subject. I would write the Duke or His Grace, depending on the form of the letter. Nor would I use secure for a person. It is a word for arrangements, not affections. The Duke's gaze sharpened. Lady Harrowden's face did not move, but Verity saw the blow reach her. The salutation is also false, Verity continued. I do not write my dear friend in confidential letters. To Aunt Beatrice, I write my dear aunt, and to acquaintances I do not write confessions. A lady careless enough to boast of manipulation would still not forget the distinctions drilled into her from childhood. Aunt Beatrice leaned back. Some of us remember our lessons. Selina looked up, eyes bright with tears. You can't prove anything from pretty rules. Verity turned to her. No. But I can prove the writer copied the outside of my hand and forgot the inside of my habits. Selina flushed. That's absurd. The contraction fell into the room with unfortunate clarity. Verity looked at the letter again. There is one more phrase. The dinner was unfortunate, yes, but useful. I do not place yes in that manner when writing. It is a conversational habit. Someone who wished to sound reluctant might use it. Selina's lips parted. You implied it was me. I examined the letter, Verity said. That is not the same as accusation. The Duke spoke for the first time. It is not. 2 words, and the room shifted. Lady Harrowden opened her fan. Your Grace, surely you will not indulge this performance. My daughter has been publicly embarrassed by a private paper, and now she seeks to turn pain into suspicion. A private paper placed beneath Lady Eastbury's napkin, he said. That is an unusual form of privacy. Lady Eastbury coloured. Lord Eastbury looked suddenly less pleased with his position near the flame. Verity folded the letter. It should be marked and witnessed before it leaves this room. The Duke stepped forward. Give it to me. I will have the matter settled quietly. No. The word left her before fear could soften it. Everyone looked at her again, even the Duke. She steadied herself. Forgive me, Your Grace. I know you intend protection, but my name is on this paper. It should not leave my hands as if I were a child whose error must be managed. His expression changed, not anger, recognition. You are correct. Lady Harrowden's mouth tightened. Must we make a public ceremony of every discomfort? It became public when it was read aloud, Aunt Beatrice said. Sealing wax was brought. Lady Belwyn, unwilling now to appear careless, witnessed the fold. Aunt Beatrice marked the outer edge with a small cross in ink. Verity kept the letter in her own hand until the guests rose from dinner, and only then did she let Aunt Beatrice hold it while she fastened her cloak. In the hall, away from the table, but not from consequence, the Duke approached. You were extraordinary. I was cornered. Those are not opposites. She looked at him then, and for one breath, the noise of the house receded. Someone in my family did this, yes. His honesty hurt less than comfort would have done. I will send Mr. Toller to make inquiries, he said, quietly. This must be settled before it harms you further. The word settled struck colder than she expected. Settled quietly? To protect you? Verity looked at the sealed letter in Aunt Beatrice's hand. Or to remove me from the room where my own name is being judged. He was silent. For the first time since she had known him, his certainty failed him before her eyes. Lady Verity, he said more softly. That was not my intention. No, she replied. But I have lived too long beneath intentions that erased me. She curtsied because propriety was still a railing one might hold over dangerous ground. Then she turned toward the carriage, with Aunt Beatrice beside her, the forged letter sealed between them, and the knowledge that Selina's whispered threat had found its first public shape. The sealed letter lay in Verity's locked drawer all night, and still she did not sleep. She heard carriage wheels in the square, distant laughter, returning from suppers, the soft settlement of old wood in Harrowden House, and beneath all of it, the voice of Lady Eastbury reading words Verity had never written. By morning, the room around her felt less like a bedroom than a place where evidence had been told to behave. She rose before the maid came, dressed in a plain morning gown, and touched the key beneath her pillow to be certain it remained there. The drawer was still locked. The letter was still inside. For one fragile hour, that seemed enough. At breakfast, Lady Harrowden appeared with perfect composure, Selina with reddened eyes and a mouth arranged for endurance. Lord Harrowden avoided every face at the table. Aunt Beatrice sat beside the window, stirring tea she had not sweetened, watching them all as if the family had become a puzzle, whose solution she already disliked. A note arrived at 10:30, but not for Verity. Mr. Baines brought it to Aunt Beatrice on a salver. She read the direction, broke the seal, and gave a brief, humorless laugh. His Grace writes to me. Verity looked up. To you? He asks whether the forged letter may be examined by Mr. Toller, his solicitor. He says the inquiry should begin before gossip fixes itself into fact. Selina lifted her head at once. That sounds sensible. Aunt Beatrice's cane tapped the carpet once. Sensible things can still be badly handled. Lady Harrowden set down her cup. It is past time the matter was removed from female agitation and placed in competent hands. My name is the one written on the letter, Verity said. Then you should be grateful His Grace means to save it. The word save touched the same bruise as pity. Verity reached for steadiness. I will send the letter to Mr. Toller myself. with a note in my own hand, and a request that a copy of his findings be returned to me. Aunt Beatrice nodded. Good, Lord Harrowden cleared his throat. My dear, perhaps delay is unwise. It is not delay to consent before one's property is taken. Lady Harrowden's eyes narrowed. Property? A scandalous paper planted at dinner is not property. It bears my hand badly enough to accuse me. That makes it mine until truth is established. Selina's spoon trembled against her saucer. You make everything sound as if the whole family has conspired against you. Verity looked at her sister. I have said no such thing. You don't have to. You let people think it. Aunt Beatrice leaned back. Some thoughts require very little assistance. Lady Harrowden rose. Enough, Verity. Write your note if you must. But do it quickly. I will not have this house chewed apart by your pride. Verity went upstairs at once. She did not trust the breakfast room, the waiting eyes, or her own ability to remain civil. At her desk, she unlocked the drawer and looked at the sealed packet. The wax and Aunt Beatrice's small ink mark were intact. She took out fresh paper and began, Sir, I place this letter in your care for examination, with the understanding that no conclusion touching my name will be made without my knowledge. She had just sanded the first page when hurried steps sounded in the passage. Annie opened the door after a soft knock, her face pale. My lady, forgive me. Lady Harrowden asked for the upstairs keys. Verity stood. When? Just now, my lady. His lordship was with her. The air seemed to leave the room. Verity looked at the drawer. The letter was still there, but the meaning of the room had altered. She took it out, tucked it beneath the half-written note, and turned as the door opened again without permission. Lord Harrowden stood on the threshold, his face strained. Behind him came Lady Harrowden, calm as a judgment already written. Verity, her father said, Westmere's messenger is below, Mr. Toller's office sent for the letter. No, Verity said. His Grace asked Aunt Beatrice whether it might be examined. I had not answered. Lady Harrowden's voice was gentle, which made it unforgivable. Your father has answered as head of this house. This is not a house account. It is a family scandal. Lord Harrowden extended his hand, not meeting her eyes. My dear, it is best, truly. Your mother says the Duke will take offence if we appear obstructive. Did His Grace say that? No one answered. Verity looked at her father and understood that fear had once again dressed itself in someone else's authority. Papa, do not take this from me. His hand wavered. For a moment she saw the man who had once carried her across a flooded garden path when she was 6, laughing because her shoes had been ruined, and telling her that brave girls did not fear puddles. Then Lady Harrowden spoke behind him. Edmund. The hand steadied. He took the sealed letter from the desk. He did not seize it. He did worse. He accepted it sadly, as if sorrow made theft refined. Verity stood very still as he carried it away. Lady Harrowden remained a moment longer. Her gaze fell on the unfinished note. There, you see. Men of rank do not wait upon a young woman's temper when reputation is at stake. No, Verity said. But mothers who fear truth often hide behind men. Lady Harrowden's face tightened. You are unwell. I am being robbed politely. Her mother left. Verity looked at the empty space in the drawer, the clean square where the letter had rested, and something in her changed with quiet finality. By noon, another from Westmere's Mouse arrived, this one addressed to Lady Verity Harrow. It was an invitation to the opera the following week, courteous, careful, and wrong, because it assumed the ground beneath them had not shifted. Verity read it once. Then she took up her pen. Your Grace, I return your invitation. I cannot accept a place beside a gentleman who means to defend my dignity by removing me from the room where it is questioned. I believe your intention was honorable. I have lived too long beneath honorable intentions that required my silence. Lady Verity Harrow. She sealed the note and rang for Annie. Send this to Westmere House. Annie looked at the direction and then at Verity's face. Yes, my lady, and ask Mrs. Aveling to come to me. Aunt Beatrice arrived before the note could have reached the street. You returned him. Yes. Are you sorry? Not yet. It will come and go. Do not mistake it for being wrong. Verity crossed to the wardrobe and drew out the old ledger she had hidden behind a stack of music books. She placed it on the desk beside the torn paper about her portion. The forged letter copied my hand, the marginal note copied Papa's. Both imitations are close, but careless where habit matters. Aunt Beatrice's expression sharpened. You think the same household is behind both. I think the same confidence is behind both. The confidence that no one would question anything that kept me useful. She opened a drawer and drew out the small poetry book found among older correspondence, the one Edwin Lark had given her 6 years before his letters stopped and her mother's pity began. The marked passage still held a faint line of pencil. To be seen truly is a form of home. Verity touched the page once, then closed it. There may be more at Brambleford Hall. Grandmama kept a strong box in the old morning room. Papa once joked she trusted country locks more than London lawyers. Your grandmother was an excellent judge of both locks and lawyers. I want to go there. Aunt Beatrice studied her. Your mother will say you are fleeing disgrace. Then she may practice being wrong in my absence. The older woman smiled slowly. Pack for 2 days, plain gowns, no maid who reports to Margaret. We leave before she turns disapproval into barricades. They did not leave unnoticed. Lady Harrowden found Verity in her bedroom before the travelling case was closed, with Selina hovering behind her in a pale morning dress and wounded disbelief. You will not go to Brambleford, Lady Harrowden said. Verity folded a dark blue gown. I will go with Aunt Beatrice. This is theatrical. No, it is practical. The strongbox is there. Selina's eyes flicked too quickly toward Lady Harrowden. Verity saw it. Her mother did too. You have become suspicious to the point of vulgarity, Lady Harrowden said. And you have become frightened enough to call truth vulgar. Selina stepped forward. Everyone will think His Grace has abandoned you. Is that what you intend everyone to think? Selina looked away. Lady Harrowden's voice dropped. You owe this family obedience. Verity closed the travelling case. I have given this family labour, loyalty, and silence. If obedience means allowing my name to be used without my voice, then I have paid enough. Her mother stared at her as if the useful daughter had risen from a chair and left a stranger standing in her place. In the hall, Mr. Baines waited with a card on a tray. From Westmere House, my lady. Verity took it. On the back, in the Duke's firm hand, one sentence had been written. I have made an error, and I ask leave to repair it in the manner you choose. The words struck deeper because they did not ask her to stay. She handed the card to Aunt Beatrice. Keep it for me. Will you answer? Not from here. Then Verity stepped out into the grey afternoon with her torn glove on her hand, the ledger in her case, and Brambleford ahead like a locked room whose key might finally belong to her. Brambleford Hall kept the truth in a porcelain jar, as if secrets became less dangerous when hidden among dried lavender. Verity discovered this within an hour of arriving, after the old housekeeper had shown her, and Aunt Beatrice into rooms smelling faintly of closed curtains, beeswax, and rain in the walls. The journey from London had left her chilled and tired, but fatigue could not soften the strange force of coming back to a place where she had once believed herself only quiet, not yet erased. Brambleford stood low and weathered beneath the Kentish sky. Its brick softened by ivy, its west roof patched in 3 places, its orchard bare except for the first hard buds of spring. Nothing about it shone for society. That was why Verity had loved it. No one at Brambleford had ever arranged her beneath a chandelier to prove another daughter brighter. The old morning room had belonged to her grandmother, Mrs. Elspeth Harrow, a woman Lady Harrowden had described as difficult whenever she meant honest. Its yellow curtains had faded. The writing desk still faced the orchard. On the mantel stood the blue porcelain jar Verity remembered from childhood, painted with tiny birds and filled now with brittle lavender gone grey at the stems. She lifted it because memory asked her to. A small iron key lay beneath the dried flowers. Aunt Beatrice, who had been warming her hands before a reluctant fire, turned at the sound of Verity's breath. There it is. Yes, the word came out almost too softly. Grandmamma, kept it where no one sensible would look. Your grandmother had a low opinion of sensible thieves. The cabinet beneath the window opened with a stubborn click. Inside sat a narrow iron strongbox, heavier than its size promised. Aunt Beatrice helped carry it to the table, then stood back while Verity fitted the key into the second lock. The box opened as though it had waited years to exhale. Inside lay folded papers tied with black ribbon, a small velvet pouch, and the poetry book Edwin Lark had given her 6 years before. Verity touched the book first. The green cover had faded at the corners. Between 2 pages, the pencil mark still underlined the passage he had once showed her during a supervised walk under the cedar trees. To be seen truly is a form of home. She had thought the sentence too bold then. Later, when his letters stopped, and her mother told her some men mistook courtesy for feeling, Verity had trained herself to consider the line sentimental. Now it looked less like sentiment, and more like evidence of a life that had almost opened. "Read the papers," Aunt Beatrice said, not unkindly. Verity untied the black ribbon. The first document was a copy of her grandmother's settlement instruction, clear enough to wound by its plainness. A portion had been set aside for Lady Verity Harrow's use upon marriage, or upon her reaching 25, if no marriage had been arranged. Verity read that line again, though she knew it already from the ledger. It felt different here. The ledger had shown theft in entries. This paper showed intention. Her grandmother had expected her to have a choice. Beneath it lay a receipt dated 6 years before, written in a formal hand. Received from an intermediary acting under family authority. The sum agreed, upon condition that Mr. Edwin Lark relinquish all further correspondence with Lady Verity Harrow and depart England without renewal of acquaintance. The connection being judged unsuitable, and further attention likely to encourage sentimental folly, injurious to family dignity. Verity did not move, the room did. The orchard beyond the window seemed to draw back, the fire to grow farther away, the table to tilt under the small square of paper. Aunt Beatrice took 1 step nearer. Verity, he was paid to leave. Yes, not because he changed his mind. Her voice remained calm. That frightened her more than tears would have done. Not because I imagined too much. Aunt Beatrice's face tightened with anger held in the only form love could bear to show. No, my dear. Verity looked at the phrase again. Sentimental folly. Family dignity. Unsuitable. Her mother's language. The very sound of Lady Harrowden's judgment pressed into another hand. She remembered Edwin's last note, so cold. She had kept it only 3 days before, burning it, because the sight of it made breakfast impossible. I have misjudged my feelings. It is better that we do not continue. For 6 years that sentence had lived inside her like a verdict. It had taught her not to expect letters, not to trust warmth, not to believe a man might look at her and remain. Now a receipt lay before her, and said the verdict had been purchased. "There is more," Aunt Beatrice said quietly. Verity forced herself to continue. Another paper listed transfers from the portion. 1 payment followed Edwin's departure by only 2 weeks. Another marked Selina's first presentation expense. A later note imitated Lord Harrowden's consent, the capital letters too careful, the end strokes too neat. Verity placed it beside the ledger copy she had brought. The same false confidence lived in both hands, not identical but related, like 2 lies told by people who had practiced in the same room. "We make a timeline," Verity said. Aunt Beatrice's eyes warmed with fierce pride. "That is my girl." They worked until the afternoon dimmed. Edwin's departure, the first transfer, Selina's gowns, the forged marginal note. The dinner toast, the forged letter. Each date became a nail in a door that had once been painted shut. Just as Verity copied the final line, the housekeeper entered with alarm held tightly behind her curtsy. "My lady, His Grace the Duke of Westmere is in the hall. He says he will wait as long as you require. He also says he won't enter unless Lady Verity permits it." Aunt Beatrice looked at the ceiling. Good. The man can be taught. Verity's hand closed around the receipt. "You wrote to him. I wrote that we had arrived safely, and that truth might be found here. I did not invite him to gallop in like a knight from a tapestry. Should I refuse him? Aunt Beatrice studied her. That choice is yours, which makes it useful practice. Verity looked at Edwin's book, at the settlement, at the receipt her mother had never meant her to see. Then she looked toward the door. Let him wait 5 minutes. The Duke waited 20. When Verity entered the hall, he stood with his hat in his hand, rain silvering the shoulders of his dark coat. He had not removed his gloves. He had not asked for tea. He had made himself a guest at the edge of permission. Lady Verity, he said, Your Grace. I came because Mrs. Aveling wrote that Brambleford held answers. I should have asked whether I was wanted before reaching your door. Yes, Verity said. You should have. He bowed his head once. Then I ask now. Where do you wish me to stand? The question moved through her with a force no compliment could have carried. No man had ever asked her that in such a room. Her father had stood behind fear. Her mother had stood before her like a wall. Society had placed her where it wished and called it order. The Duke waited. He did not fill the silence with apology. Verity felt the old instinct to choose the least troublesome answer. Then she let it pass. Beside me, she said. Not before me. His eyes changed, not with triumph, but with something deeper and quieter. Then beside you. She brought him into the morning room. Aunt Beatrice remained near the fire as chaperone and witness. Verity handed him the receipt. Read it, he did. His face lost all warmth by the second line, but he did not speak until he finished. Edwin Lark, he said. He courted me 6 years ago. I was told he abandoned the connection because I had misunderstood him, and this says he was paid. It says someone judged me unworthy of knowing why I had been left. The Duke folded the receipt with careful hands. I am sorry. Do not be sorry for what you did not do. Then I am angry for what was done. Anger may stand beside me too, if it does not speak first. For one breath, his composure almost broke. Then he inclined his head. It will obey. Carriage wheels sounded on the drive before Verity could answer. The housekeeper appeared again, pale now without concealment. Lady Harrowden has arrived, my lady. Lady Selina is with her. Aunt Beatrice took up her cane. The fox has smelled the missing hen house. Lady Harrowden entered the morning room, still wearing her travelling cloak, with Selina behind her, in a bonnet tied too hastily beneath her chin. The Countess stopped when she saw the Duke, but only for the length of a heartbeat. Your Grace? How unfortunate that my daughter has drawn you into an old family confusion. Documents are rarely confusion, Lady Harrowden. People make them so. Her gaze moved to the strong box. Verity, give that to me. Selina's eyes went to Aunt Beatrice's hand, where the receipt rested half hidden beneath the settlement copy. Too quick, too direct. Verity saw it. So did the Duke. Lady Harrowden removed her gloves finger by finger, an act of calm meant to re-establish command. You are tired and overwrought. These papers concern arrangements made for your welfare, before you could understand them. Verity lifted Edwin's book from the table. Was Edwin Lark paid to leave for my welfare? Selina whispered. Mama. Lady Harrowden's head turned sharply. The whisper had given away fear before strategy could cover it. Verity looked at her sister. You knew there was a receipt. I saw papers, Selina said. You looked for one. That's unfair. The same contraction. The same defensive edge. Verity felt the puzzle tighten. Lady Harrowden stepped forward. Edwin Lark was unsuitable. The room went still. It was not denial. It was confession dressed as justification. Verity's hand closed around the poetry book. Then you did it. I preserved you from a foolish attachment. No. You purchased his absence and sold it back to me as proof I was not worth staying for. For the first time, Lady Harrowden looked truly shaken. Not by guilt, by the precision of being named. You would have thrown yourself away on a man with no power, no fortune, and no future fit for you. So you used my future to buy Selina's. Selina flinched. Lady Harrowden's eyes hardened. Selina had prospects. You had steadiness. A family must use what it has. The sentence might have destroyed Verity once. Now it found no empty room inside her. I was not a household economy. The Duke moved only when Lady Harrowden reached toward the strongbox. He did not touch her. He simply stepped into the line between her hand and the table, rank made physical and still. No one removes anything while Lady Verity objects. Lady Harrowden's face whitened. This is a family matter. Then the family should be grateful it has a witness. Verity placed the receipt, settlement, and Edwin's book together in Aunt Beatrice's care. Her voice, when it came, surprised her by its steadiness. These papers will leave Brambleford only with me. Lady Harrowden stared at the daughter she had long mistaken for a tool that could not refuse the hand using it. Selina looked away first. Rain tapped against the window. The old morning room smelled of lavender, ink, and damp stone. Verity stood with the Duke beside her, not before her, and understood that the truth had not healed the wound. It had done something more dangerous. It had given the wound a name no one could command her to forget. By the time Verity returned to London, Selina had already become the injured daughter, in every room, willing to purchase sweetness at the price of truth. The story had changed shape during the 3 days. Verity spent securing the Brambleford papers with Aunt Beatrice's solicitor, and making copies no hand in Harrowden House could steal. In one version, the Duke of Westmere had been all but promised to Lady Selina before Verity's resentment unsettled him. In another, Verity had misunderstood ordinary kindness and fled to the country when her hopes were not rewarded quickly enough. Lady Harrowden had not said any of this plainly. She had only sighed in the proper places, corrected names with maternal sorrow, and mentioned that younger daughters often suffered most when elder sisters grew lonely. It was beautifully done. That was why Verity chose not to hide. Aunt Beatrice approved the decision while fastening her gloves in the carriage. A lie dislikes an audience that can answer back. Then let us hope I remember how to answer, Verity said. You remembered at Belwyn's dinner when they tried to put poison in your handwriting. I have no fear for your memory. The carriage stopped before Lady Belwyn's house, where the afternoon drawing-room had already gathered more guests than courtesy required. Verity wore dark green again, with no ornament beyond a small brooch that had belonged to her grandmother. On her right hand, she wore the torn pearl-grey glove, cleaned and mended once more, the seam still visible. She had considered leaving it behind. Then she remembered Selina's flawless pair, her mother's attempt to transfer even a color from one daughter to another, and she put the old glove on as deliberately as a soldier might take up a standard. The room quieted when she entered. Fans paused. Teacups lowered. Lady Belwyn sat beneath a gilt mirror, delighted and alarmed by her own success in hosting danger twice in 1 week. Lady Eastbury stood near the tea table, already leaning toward someone with the unfinished shape of a whisper on her lips. Selina stood by the pianoforte in pale rose muslin, her face soft with suffering. Lady Harrowden stood beside her, one hand resting on Selina's shoulder, with the grace of a mother guarding innocence from the very daughter she had wronged. Lady Verity, Lady Belwyn said. How brave of you to come. I was invited, Verity replied. I did not know attendance required bravery. A faint stir moved through the room. Aunt Beatrice took her place near a chair and remained standing, which made the chair look as though it had failed to deserve her. Lady Harrowden's smile held. My dear, no one questions your right to be present. That is new, Verity said. Selina's eyes filled at once, but the tears remained exactly where they would be most useful. I don't want this quarrel. I only want us to be sisters again. Verity looked at her. Again, the word was gentle. That made it harder to dismiss. Yes, Selina said, her voice trembling. Before his grace came, and everything became so cruel. The footman announced the Duke of Westmere before Verity could answer. Every head turned with relief, sharpened by curiosity. Lucian entered in dark afternoon dress, bowed to Lady Belwyn, acknowledged Lady Harrowden and Selina with exact courtesy, and then crossed to Aunt Beatrice and Verity. He did not offer Verity his arm. He did not place himself before her. He stood at a distance that said protection without possession. Lady Verity. Your Grace. Aunt Beatrice glanced at him. You arrive at an educational hour. Then I shall try to learn before I speak. Verity heard the apology beneath the sentence. More importantly, she heard that he meant it. Lady Harrowden moved before the room could settle into his alignment. Your Grace, I fear you find us in a cloud of family feeling. Verity has been much affected by misunderstanding, and Selina has borne the consequence with more sweetness than one could ask. Sweetness is not evidence, Aunt Beatrice said. Lady Belwyn made a small noise into her tea. Selina looked at the Duke with wounded courage. I never wished anyone to think ill of Verity. Mamma only said everyone knew you first showed interest in me. No, the Duke said. The single word was so quiet that several people leaned closer to feel the blow. Selina's lips parted. You were kind to me. I was civil. You sat beside me at dinner. I was seated beside you. The distinction moved through the room like a blade drawn slowly from velvet. Verity kept still. This correction had to come from him, not because she needed rescue, but because the lie was built around his supposed intention. Lady Harrowden's hand tightened on Selina's shoulder. A mother may be forgiven for interpreting attention generously when a daughter's future is concerned. A mother may hope, the Duke said. She may not convert civility into a claim. Selina flushed. The room had been prepared to pity her, now pity hesitated. Verity took one step forward. Lady Selina, you told several people I had interfered with expectations between you and His Grace. I said I was confused, Selina replied. Everyone was confused. Were you confused at Brambleford? Selina's face changed too quickly, and then she smoothed it. You shouldn't have gone there. Why? Because it was old family business, and you made it ugly. It was ugly before I found it. Lady Harrowden's voice entered softly. Verity, this public airing of household matters does not become you, nor did the public reading of a forged letter. Yet it occurred. Lady Eastbury's fan stopped. The reminder had teeth, and more than one guest looked toward her. Verity opened her reticule and drew out a folded copy of the receipt from Brambleford, not the original. The original was safe beyond Lady Harrowden's reach. At Brambleford, I found documents concerning my grandmother's settlement, my portion, and a gentleman named Mr. Edwin Lark. Lady Belwyn leaned forward despite herself. The gentleman who went abroad? Yes, Verity did not look away from Selina. A receipt shows he was paid to abandon his correspondence with me. The phrases used in that receipt are familiar. Family dignity, unsuitable attachment, sentimental folly. Lady Harrowden's expression did not alter. That was a mistake. Innocence would have been startled by the words. Calculation only measured whether they could be survived. Old papers can be misread by wounded feelings, she said. So can letters placed under napkins, Verity answered. A murmur moved through the room. Selina lifted her chin. What has this to do with me? Perhaps nothing. Verity unfolded the copy, but held it in her own hand. Yet when you arrived at Brambleford, you looked at Aunt Beatrice's hand before anyone had named the receipt. I saw papers. You looked for one paper. That's ridiculous. The contraction landed hard in the listening room. Selina heard it too late. She added quickly, It is ridiculous. Lady Eastbury's eyes sharpened. The same defensive turn had sounded at Belwyn's dinner, when Verity exposed the false letter's habits. Verity did not press too quickly. You also knew the Duke's opera invitation had named me before Mamma showed it to you. You wore pearl grey gloves before I had given up mine. You allowed a letter to be read aloud that used my hand but your manner of reluctance. How much did you help, Selina? Selina's tears spilled then, real this time, because fear had broken the performance. You were taking everything. The room stilled. Lady Harrowden said, Selina. No, Selina whispered, then raised her voice, because she could not bear the silence. She wasn't supposed to become important. His Grace was meant to meet me. Everyone knew it. Mamma planned it. I had done everything properly. I smiled, I dressed, I said what I was taught to say. Then Verity sat there with her roofs and her figures and her sorrow, and he looked at her as if I had disappeared. Verity felt the words strike, but not as they were meant to. There was jealousy in them, yes, but also terror. Selina had been trained to believe admiration was food, and Verity's first mouthful of it had seemed like theft. Lady Harrowden moved sharply. You are distressed, darling. Say no more. No, Verity said. Let her finish one honest sentence. We have all suffered enough from unfinished ones. The Duke's gaze remained on Verity, not Selina. He was waiting for her lead. That steadied her. Lady Harrowden turned to the room, gathering authority from the oldest source she knew. Very well. Since plainness is fashionable this afternoon, let us be plain. Families survive by prudent distribution. Selina had prospects. Verity had steadiness. A portion left idle for a daughter with no likely match, while another daughter's future might preserve us all, would have been a sentimental waste. I acted as mothers have always acted, according to the interest of the family. The words were quieter than shouting, and worse for that reason. They revealed not a lapse, but a philosophy. Verity felt the room understand, some with shock, some with embarrassment, some with the discomfort of recognizing a cruelty they had often seen made prettier. You did not preserve the family, Verity said. You spent one daughter to decorate another. Selina covered her mouth. Lady Harrowden's gaze hardened. No gentleman of sense seeks a woman whose portion has been consumed by scandal, and whose own family cannot agree whether she is injured or merely ambitious. This time, the Duke stepped forward only one pace. Stolen money is not poverty. Exposed cruelty is not scandal. And Lady Verity's refusal to be silent is not ambition. Verity turned slightly, not to lean on him, but to acknowledge that he had stood exactly where she had allowed him to stand. Lady Harrowden saw the movement and knew she had lost the room's certainty. Lady Belwyn's curiosity had become caution. Lady Eastbury looked as if the story in her possession had grown too serious for easy pleasure. Aunt Beatrice smiled without warmth. Verity folded the receipt copy and returned it to her reticule. Let society whisper if it must, she said, but let it whisper accurately. My portion was redirected, my name was forged, my past was purchased from me. And I will not provide the silence required to make any of that seem graceful. She curtsied to Lady Belwyn, because dignity still had forms, then turned toward the door. Aunt Beatrice went with her. The Duke remained behind them long enough for Lady Harrowden to say, low and bitter, she has ruined herself. His reply carried through the room with restrained finality. No, Lady Harrowden. You have only made witnesses. The Duke asked for permission, only after he had learned what it cost to act without it. He came after Verity and Aunt Beatrice had stepped from Lady Belwyn's house into the damp Mayfair evening, but he did not call her name as if the pavement belonged to him. He waited beneath the portico until the footmen had gone for their carriage, then stopped at a distance polite enough for society and careful enough for her. Behind them, the drawing-room still murmured with the damage of truth. Ahead of them, the square lay grey beneath the lamps, carriages moving through mist-like judgments not yet delivered. Lady Verity, he said. She turned. Aunt Beatrice remained beside her, one gloved hand on her cane and one brow lifted in warning. Your Grace? Lucian held his hat in one hand. Rain had darkened the shoulders of his coat, though he seemed not to notice. May I call tomorrow morning? Verity's fingers tightened around the reticule that held the copy of Edwin Lark's receipt. To tell me what has been done? No, his answer came at once. To ask what you wish done next. That difference entered her more deeply than she expected. It did not heal the wound of the stolen letter. It did not erase the ache of seeing her father's hand take evidence from her desk, because fear had asked him to. But it showed that the Duke had understood the wound's shape. I will not be managed, she said. No, I will not be placed safely outside the room while men repair my name on my behalf. No, and I will not accept a quiet settlement if quietness protects those who injured me, more than it protects me. His gaze did not leave her face. Then I will come to hear the terms of the room you choose. Aunt Beatrice gave a small, satisfied sniff. Improvement is possible, after all. The carriage arrived before Verity could answer. The Duke bowed and stepped back, allowing her to enter without offering an arm she had not requested. That restraint followed her all the way home. The next morning, Harrowden House felt as if every wall had been instructed to listen. Lady Harrowden had withdrawn to her chamber, with a headache no servant believed. Selina remained behind her door. Lord Harrowden sent once to ask whether Verity would attend him in the library, then sent again to say perhaps later would be better. Verity did not go. She sat in Aunt Beatrice's borrowed parlour with the Bramblefoot papers arranged on the table in 3 small groups: the forged hand, the stolen portion, and the paid departure of Mr. Edwin Lark. The torn pearl-grey glove lay beside them. She had removed it because for once she wished to see the thing that had been made to endure. At 11, the Duke was shown in. He bowed to Aunt Beatrice, then to Verity, and remained standing until Verity indicated the chair across from her. "You asked what I wished done next," she said. "Yes, before that I need to know what is fact and what is only suspicion." "Mr. Toller has examined the letter your father sent to his office," the Duke said. His voice remained even, but the pause before the words "your father" told Verity that he had not forgotten how the letter reached him. He has also seen the copy of the marginal note from the ledger and the copy of the receipt from Bramblefoot. I asked him for no public action, only confirmation. Aunt Beatrice sat near the window, apparently occupied with winding thread around one finger. "And what does the competent gentleman confirm?" "3 things. The Duke placed a folded memorandum on the table, but did not push it toward Verity. First, the forged letter and the false marginal note share the same weakness. The hand copies shape, but not habit. The imitator knew how the letters looked at a glance, not how either writer thought while writing. Verity looked at the table. That was Selina's world exactly. Appearance without structure. Second, your grandmother's settlement instruction is genuine. Mr. Toller found an older copy among papers kept by Harrowden's former solicitor. Your portion was to be held for your use upon marriage, or upon your reaching 25, if no marriage had been arranged. 25. The words had hurt at Bramblefoot. Now they acquired an official edge. I am 27, yes. So 2 years were taken after the law of the paper had already released me. The Duke's expression tightened. Yes, Aunt Beatrice's thread snapped between her fingers. No one commented. Third, Verity asked, the receipt concerning Mr. Edwin Lark is real. The payment passed through an intermediary connected to Lady Harrowden's circle. The paper does not prove what Mr. Lark was told, but it proves money changed hands in return for his departure and silence. Verity closed her eyes for one breath only. She had promised herself she would not spend this morning weeping over a man 6 years gone. Yet Edwin was not the true grief. The grief was the life her mother had taught her to mistrust in herself. Thank you, she said. Those are the facts. They are enough to compel restitution quietly, the Duke said. Then he stopped, as if hearing himself step toward the old mistake. But quietness is not mine to offer unless you ask it. Verity looked at him then. His restraint was not effortless. It cost him something to sit there with rank, influence, and anger at his command, and not use them before she permitted it. That cost made the respect real. I do not want quiet restitution, she said. Aunt Beatrice's eyes gleamed. Excellent. Verity stood because the words required more room than a chair allowed. I was judged before witnesses. I was reduced before witnesses. My mother toasted another daughter by making my usefulness into a flaw. A false letter was read before guests. Then Selina's claim was carried through drawing rooms, as if my silence were proof. I will not have the truth corrected in a solicitor's office, and delivered afterward, like a receipt for clean linen. The Duke rose when she did, but he did not step closer. What room do you choose? A formal reconciliation dinner at Harrowden House tomorrow evening. Aunt Beatrice smiled outright. Your mother will enjoy the word reconciliation until she discovers its meaning. The guests must include Lady Belwyn, Lord and Lady Eastbury, the Marchioness of Vale, Aunt Beatrice, and Mr. Toller as witness to documents only. He must not make it a court. He must confirm facts when asked and no more. The Duke nodded. And my part? You protect the room, not me. His eyes held hers. Tell me the difference. If Lady Harrowden interrupts before I have spoken, you may stop her. If Selina weeps, you may not let pity become a curtain. If Lord Harrowden tries to apologize before the truth is named, you may wait. But I speak first. The first account of my own life must be mine. He bowed his head slightly. It will be. The door opened before Aunt Beatrice could praise the sentence. Lord Harrowden stood in the threshold, pale and diminished by the act of arriving. Verity. She turned. Papa. His eyes moved across to the papers and stopped on the glove. He looked at it as if he had never understood that tears could be made of leather. I did not know all of it, he said. The old Verity would have hurried toward him. She would have given him a softer version of his guilt and called it kindness. She stayed where she was. But you knew enough. He flinched. Your mother said the arrangements were necessary, and you wanted necessary to mean blameless. His hand went to the back of a chair. What must I do? Verity picked up a blank sheet of paper from the table. You will send invitations in your own hand. A family reconciliation dinner tomorrow evening. You will invite exactly whom I name. You will not warn Mama of the evidence beyond what she already fears. And when the time comes, you will not speak before me. Lord Harrowden looked at the Duke, perhaps by old habit, searching for male permission. The Duke did not rescue him. Lady Verity has given the instruction, Lucian said. I advise you to follow it. Lord Harrowden nodded. Yes. The word was small, but it was the first useful thing he had offered in days. After he left, Aunt Beatrice began listing households with the severity of a general assigning positions. The Duke remained by the table, his gaze lowered to the glove. My aunt has heard of you, he said after a quiet moment. Verity looked up. Your aunt? The Dowager Duchess of Westmere. She writes that any woman who insists upon truth before comfort is worth meeting, though she warns me not to bring her a lady who simpers over tapestries and ignores roofs. Despite herself, Verity almost smiled. She sounds formidable. She is. She will like you. That is a confident claim. No, he said. It is a hope wearing better clothes. The softness of it unsettled the air between them. Verity felt something approach, not spoken yet, but alive. He felt it too. His expression altered, then steadied with deliberate restraint. There is something I wish to say, he said. But not before tomorrow. Her breath caught. Why? Because I will not place even tenderness between you and your freedom. Aunt Beatrice became suddenly absorbed in folding invitations. Verity looked at the Duke, at the man who had once stood before a room for her, and now had learned to wait outside her choice. Then tomorrow, she said. After I speak, after you speak, he answered. By dusk, the invitations had gone out across Mayfair, in Lord Harrowden's unsteady hand, carrying the word reconciliation into houses that would hear only scandal. Upstairs, Lady Harrowden still believed a dinner table was a thing she knew how to command. Downstairs, Verity placed the torn glove beside the papers and understood that tomorrow the table would answer to her. Harrowden House had dressed itself for reconciliation, but every candle seemed to know it had been summoned for judgment. The dining room shone with the same painful beauty it had worn on the night. Lady Harrowden toasted Selina before witnesses and called it maternal pride. The silver had been polished. The flowers had been replaced with pale camellias again, though this time no thorn could be blamed for what had been torn. Verity stood near the sideboard while the guests arrived one by one, not hiding her hands. The torn pearl-grey glove lay folded beside her plate, visible and deliberate, its mended seam turned upward. Aunt Beatrice saw it and gave the smallest nod. Lord Harrowden hovered at the head of the table, pale enough to look older than he had the day before. Lady Harrowden entered in black lace and diamonds, severe, elegant, and still convinced that a room could be bent if one held one's posture firmly enough. Selina followed in ivory silk, her perfect gloves buttoned at the wrist, her eyes already bright. Lady Belwyn arrived hungry for history. Lord and Lady Eastbury came with solemn faces that fooled no one. The Marchioness of Vale brought a cold dignity that suggested she had not come to enjoy scandal, but she would not look away from it. Mr. Toller stood near the sideboard, with a leather case in his hand, present not as a guest and not as a judge, but as a witness to facts. Last came the Duke of Westmere. He bowed to Lord and Lady Harrowden, acknowledged the guests, and then looked at Verity. Not long enough to claim the moment. Long enough to keep his promise. They took their places, but no dinner was served. No one reached for wine. Lady Harrowden remained standing at the foot of the table, her hand resting lightly on the chair back, as if she still presided over the evening. "My friends," she began, "you have been invited because an unfortunate family misunderstanding has wandered too far beyond its natural bounds. I hope we may tonight restore proportion, affection, and discretion." Verity rose before the next sentence could smooth over the first lie. The room turned toward her. Lady Harrowden's eyes hardened. "Verity, sit down." The Duke's voices came from across the table, quiet and absolute. "Lady Verity has the floor." No one moved after that. Verity did not look at him. She looked at her mother. "No, Mama. This is not a misunderstanding. It is the first time the truth has been invited to dine where falsehood was served before it." Lady Eastbury's fan stopped. Selina's mouth trembled. Verity lifted the first paper from beside her plate. "Most of you were present when a letter was read aloud at Lady Belwyn's table. It bore my name. It said I had contrived His Grace's pity, used public humiliation for advantage, and meant to injure Selina." Lady Belwyn shifted, no longer delighted. "I regret that it occurred in my house," she murmured. "So do I," Verity said. "But regret after appetite is not prevention." Lady Belwyn lowered her eyes. Verity continued. "The letter was false. I said so then. I say so again now. It copied the shape of my hand and forgot the habits of my correspondence. Mr. Toller has compared it with a false marginal note in an old household ledger." She turned slightly. "Mr. Toller." The solicitor opened one paper. "The two writings show the same method of imitation. They are close in appearance and careless in habit. In my judgment, they came from the same source, or from persons working from the same pattern." He closed the paper and said no more. Verity saw Lady Harrowden's lips press together. "The second matter is my grandmother's settlement," Verity said. "Mrs. Elspeth Harrow left a portion for my use upon marriage, or upon my reaching 25 if no marriage had been arranged. I am 27. For 2 years I have lived as a dependent daughter, while papers already gave me a measure of freedom." Lord Harrowden covered his mouth with one hand. Verity let him feel it. She would not rush to soften a truth he had avoided. Transfers were made from that portion toward Selina's presentation, her dressmakers, and her future settlement. Some entries bear Papa's hand. Some imitate it. Lady Harrowden lifted her chin. "Families survive by prudent distribution. One daughter had prospects. The other had duties. I was not soil to be planted where you expected profit," Verity said. "I was your daughter." The words landed without ornament. That made them impossible to dismiss. Selina made a small sound, but Verity did not turn to her yet. She lifted the third paper. 6 years ago, Mr. Edwin Lark paid me honourable attention at Brambleford Hall. I was told he had misjudged his feelings and left because I had imagined more than existed. At Brambleford I found a receipt showing he was paid to relinquish all correspondence with me and depart England. The receipt uses familiar words: family dignity, unsuitable attachment, sentimental folly. Lady Harrowden's composure flickered. He was unsuitable. A murmur moved around the table. It was too late for denial now. Verity felt the admission pass through every witness. "You have answered," she said. "You purchased his absence, then gave me his silence as proof I was not worth staying for." Selina whispered, "You don't understand." Verity looked at her sister at last. "Then explain." Selina's eyes filled properly, prettily, desperately. It wasn't meant to become so cruel. Aunt Beatrice's cane touched the floor once. That is rarely said by people prevented from cruelty. It is usually said by people discovered in it. Selina flinched. Lady Harrowden said, "Do not speak, darling." But Selina did speak, because fear had broken the training that sweetness had preserved. "You were taking everything." Her voice shook. "His Grace was meant to meet me. Mama said he would, Everyone expected it. You were useful. You had always been useful. You weren't supposed to matter. The sentence stood naked in the room. Even Lady Harrowden seemed struck by its force. Not because it was false, but because Selina had spoken aloud what everyone had been meant to practice silently. Verity's hand moved toward the torn glove, but she did not pick it up. "No," she said softly. "I was not supposed to know that I mattered already." Selina began to cry then, not as performance, but as a child might cry, when the mirror finally showed the cost of being adored wrongly. Lady Harrowden reached for command one last time. "I did what I did to preserve this family. Edmund would not act. Creditors pressed. Selina could secure our place if properly presented. Verity had sense enough to help and no prospect worth preserving. I made the choices others were too weak to make." Lord Harrowden rose unsteadily. "Margaret, stop." She turned on him. "You left every unpleasant thing to me." "Yes," he said. The room seemed startled by his agreement. "That is my guilt. I left too much to you, and then I called my cowardice peace." He looked at Verity, and for the first time his apology did not ask to be forgiven before it had finished existing. "I signed what I should not have signed. I looked away from what I should have questioned. At that first dinner, I should have spoken before His Grace stood. I did not. I am sorry." Verity accepted the words only as far as they deserved to come. "You will restore what was taken." "Yes, in writing. Tonight." "Yes." Mr. Toller stepped forward with papers already prepared. There was no dramatic noise while they were signed. Only the scratch of a pen, the small scrape of a chair, and the terrible dignity of consequences arriving in ink. Lord Harrowden signed. Mr. Toller witnessed. The Duke did not move. He did not touch the papers. He did not make justice appear to be his gift. When it was done, Verity lifted the torn glove from beside her plate and placed it in the center of the table. The room watched the small, worn thing, as if it were a relic from a battle no one had admitted was being fought. Verity looked at her mother. "You did not make me worthy by failing to love me." Lady Harrowden's face trembled once. No answer came. Perhaps she had no sentence left that could command a daughter who no longer needed to be reduced. The Duke lifted his glass only after Verity had finished speaking. "To Lady Verity Harrow," he said. "Not for being useful, not for being patient, not for surviving what should never have been asked of her. To her courage in naming the truth, and to the dignity she possessed before any of us had the honor to witness it." One by one, the glasses rose. Lady Belwyn's first, then the Marchioness of Vales, then Lord Eastbury's with a shamefaced hesitation, then Lady Eastbury's, then Lord Harrowden's shaking hand. Selina did not lift hers. Lady Harrowden did not either. Verity did not require it. This time the room knew which daughter had been seen. Verity raised her own glass last. The wine touched her lips, sharp and bright. She set it down and looked once more at the glove on the table. It had done what no ornament in that room had done. It had told the truth. Lady Harrowden whispered, "Where will you go now?" Verity looked at the doorway, then at Aunt Beatrice, then at the Duke, who waited a respectful pace away. "Out of the room where I learned to disappear." She left Harrowden House without haste, Aunt Beatrice beside her, and the Duke behind her by exactly the distance she had allowed. No one called her back. No one had that right anymore. 3 weeks after Verity left Harrowden House, London did not become kinder. It became cautious. That was different, and in society often more useful. Lady Harrowden withdrew from several invitations under the excuse of delicate health, though no one failed to notice that her health had become delicate only after witnesses had heard her daughter name the truth. Selina was sent to Bath under the supervision of a widowed aunt, who had never admired tears unless they followed repentance. Lord Harrowden signed every paper Mr. Toller placed before him, and Verity's portion stood at last in trust for her own use, beyond the reach of household necessity, maternal ambition, and apology. Freedom did not feel triumphant at first. It felt unfamiliar, like walking through a house after years of moving around furniture no one else admitted was there. Verity stayed with Aunt Beatrice in a small but well-ordered Mayfair house where no one asked her to sweeten tea she did not want, smooth quarrels she had not caused, or mend reputations with silence. Some mornings she woke ready to account for candles, poultry, coal, and moods. Then she remembered she did not have to. Aunt Beatrice called this progress and warned her not to expect liberty to curtsy prettily on arrival. "It comes in sensible shoes," she said. "They rub at first." The invitation to Westmere Abbey arrived on the 22nd day, addressed in the Duke's firm hand to Lady Verity Harrow alone. He asked whether she and Mrs. Aveling would honour the Dowager Duchess of Westmere with a visit of 2 nights, properly chaperoned and arranged with every courtesy. At the bottom, one line held Verity still longer than the rest. "I would like you to see the house as it is, not as society imagines it," she answered in her own hand. The carriage reached Westmere Abbey near 4 o'clock on a clear afternoon, after nearly 40 miles of road softened by spring green. The estate rose from the Kentish landscape in pale stone, old but not neglected, grand but not desperate to prove it. Tenant cottages stood along the lower road, with sound roofs and clean ditches. The kitchen garden showed ordered work without panic. Nothing appeared arranged as bait. That was the first thing Verity noticed. The Duke waited at the entrance, with the Dowager Duchess beside him. A silver-haired woman, whose sharp eyes seemed to take account of everything, and forgive very little without cause. Lucien bowed to Aunt Beatrice, then to Verity. "Lady Verity, your Grace, you came, you invited me." His gaze warmed, though his voice remained calm. I had hoped the 2 facts might meet. The Dowager Duchess offered Verity her hand. "My nephew wrote that you understand roofs, figures, and truth. I confess I prefer any woman who can distinguish a house from a stage setting." Aunt Beatrice brightened at once. "Madam, I believe we may agree on several enemies." "Excellent," said the Dowager. "I am too old to waste disagreement on amateurs." Verity nearly laughed, and the sound, small as it was, startled her. Westmere Abbey did not begin with portraits or jewels. The Duke led her, with the 2 older ladies following at a proper distance, and then, abandoning all pretense of ignorance by discussing them audibly, first to the estate office. Maps lined one wall. Ledgers lay open on a broad desk. A plan for drainage near the lower cottages had been weighted with a brass paper knife. Verity stopped on the threshold. "You brought me here before the drawing room." "Yes. Why?" "Because the drawing room will show you what my ancestors wished visitors to admire. This room shows what I cannot afford to neglect." He lifted the plan. "My steward recommends raising the front threshold stones after the last heavy rain. I think he has missed the slope behind the washhouse." Verity crossed to the desk before remembering to hesitate. "May I see?" He gave her the paper. Their gloves brushed. It was a brief contact, nothing improper, and yet her breath noticed it. She studied the drawing and pointed behind the rear wall. "Here. If the water comes from the field, raising the front will trap damp inside. The back ditch must be opened first, then the threshold raised after." The Duke looked at the plan, then at her. "That was my thought. Then why ask? Because agreement freely given is better than admiration guessed at." The words were quiet. They entered the room with more force than praise. Verity set the paper down. "You are very determined not to make old mistakes. I am very determined not to make them with you." She looked away before the answer could show too plainly on her face. On a side table, beneath a glass weight, lay a new pair of pearl grey gloves. The kid leather was fine, the stitching almost invisible. Verity's heart tightened. "I have overstepped," he said at once. "No." She moved closer. "You remembered. I remember too much where you are concerned. That sounds inconvenient. It has become necessary." He paused. "They are not meant to replace the old pair. I would not ask you to pretend the tear did not matter. Then what are they? Something for the hand that no longer needs to hide." Verity touched the edge of the glass weight, but did not lift it. Kindness had once seemed safest when it was small enough to deny. This kindness had been chosen carefully, and the care of it was almost unbearable. That evening, dinner was served in a smaller dining room than she expected. The Dowager Duchess sat at one end, Aunt Beatrice beside her, the Duke across from Verity rather than above her, and no one arranged any woman as a solution to a family's debts. Conversation moved through tenant repairs, music, the wicked expense of hothouse flowers, and Aunt Beatrice's opinion that most households would improve if daughters were asked what they knew before sons were praised for what they guessed. Near the end of the meal, a footman poured wine. Verity's glass remained untouched. The memory came without warning. Another dining room, another raised glass, her mother's voice making admiration into a weapon. The Duke noticed. Of course he noticed. But he did not lift his own glass first. He waited. The room gave her time. Slowly, Verity raised hers. "Two houses," she said, "steady now, that do not require a woman to disappear in order to keep them standing." The Dowager Duchess lifted her glass at once. "To that most reasonable foundation," Aunt Beatrice followed. The Duke raised his last. "To the woman who taught me the difference." No applause came. No fan snapped open. No whisper rushed ahead of the feeling. That made it better. After dinner, with the drawing-room doors open and the lamps bright enough for propriety, the Duke asked whether Verity would walk with him on the terrace. The two older ladies remained inside over cards, both pretending not to see everything. The evening smelled of cut grass and stone cooling after sun. For several moments, Verity and Lucien stood side by side, looking over the darkening park. "I told you there was something I wished to say after you were free," he said. "I remember." He turned to her. "I love you, Verity, not because I defended you, and not because a room was wrong, and I happened to see it. I love you because you are clear where others are ornate, brave where others are loud, and tender in ways you tried to hide, because no one had guarded them properly. I would like to court you with the intention of marriage. If you say no, I will still defend your good name wherever I have power to do so. If you say yes, I will spend my life making certain you never have to earn your place at my table." Verity looked at him for a long time. The old fears rose faithfully. They asked whether gratitude could disguise itself as love, whether a grand house could become another cage, whether safety might one day demand silence. Then she looked through the open doors at Aunt Beatrice, laughing with the Dowager Duchess. She looked toward the estate office, where her judgment had been requested before her charm. She looked at the man who had learned to ask where she wished him to stand. "I will not be rescued into marriage," she said. "No, I will not be displayed as proof of your virtue, never, and I will disagree with your steward when he is wrong." His smile came fully then, rare and unguarded. "I shall warn him," Verity drew a breath that felt like stepping through a door she had chosen. "Then yes. You may court me with the intention of marriage." He did not take her hand until she offered it. When she did, he bowed over it with such restraint that tenderness felt safe. Months later, after society accepted the engagement with the speed of people, eager to stand near the winning truth, Verity placed the old torn glove in a small drawer in the Westmere estate office. Not hidden, kept. Some things were not meant to be worn forever, but they deserved to remain as witness. At their first dinner after the betrothal, the Duke stood behind her chair and did not sit when the others did. Verity looked up, amused and moved in equal measure. "Your Grace? Not yet," he said softly. "Not until you are where you choose to be." So Lady Verity Harrow took her place beside him, not below the salt, not behind another woman's shine, not as a duty mistaken for a daughter, but as herself. Only then did the Duke of Westmere sit, and the house that had waited for her seemed at last to understand its mistress.